Hey everyone, welcome to East Park. Today I want to argue that the most honest thing on television for the last 27 years has not been a news program or a documentary or a serious drama made by serious people who went to serious schools and collected serious awards for being serious. It has been a cartoon about four foul-mouthed 10-year-olds from a tiny mountain town in Colorado. South Park has done something that no other show in the history of television has managed to do. Consistently, repeatedly, and without apology across nearly 3 decades. It looked at the most famous, most powerful, most protected people on the planet and said the thing that everyone was already thinking but had quietly agreed not to say out loud. It turned Barbra Streisand into a giant robot. It put Tom Cruise in a closet. It told Kanye West he was a gay fish and watched him prove the point in real time. It figured out who Mel Gibson actually was 2 years before the rest of the world caught up. It called Kim Kardashian a hobbit and refused to back down. It watched Prince Harry and Meghan Markle drive through town on a worldwide privacy tour and simply described what it saw. Each of those episodes is a case study in something genuinely rare: the willingness to look directly at a famous person, past the image and the reverence, and describe what is actually there. But before we continue, make sure you are subscribed and have the bell notification turned on so you do not miss anything we put out on this channel. That said, let us get into it. The one that started it all. Barbra Streisand becomes Mecha Streisand. South Park has been destroying celebrity egos for almost 30 years now. No one has been safe. No one has been too powerful, too famous, or too beloved to escape what Trey Parker and Matt Stone would eventually do to them on screen. But every story has a beginning, and the beginning of South Park's war on celebrity ego wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. It came from a real place of genuine, personal, deeply felt hatred. The year was 1997. South Park was a brand new show on Comedy Central. Nobody knew yet what it was capable of. The first few episodes had made people laugh, made people uncomfortable, and made parents genuinely worried about what their kids were watching. But the show hadn't fully shown its teeth yet when it came to celebrities. That changed in February of 1998 with a season 1 episode called Mecha Streisand, and the target was Barbra Streisand. Now, to understand why Barbra Streisand specifically, you have to understand that this wasn't just a case of Parker and Stone picking a famous person at random and deciding to poke fun at them. In almost every other early episode where they made fun of celebrities, it was purely for laughs. No real feelings involved, just comedy. But with Barbra Streisand, it was different. It was personal. In interviews, Parker and Stone have said clearly that most of the celebrities they mock on the show, they don't actually hate. It's all just in good fun. But then they would always add something like, except when it comes to Barbra Streisand, we genuinely hate her. So why the hatred? It comes down to something that happened in Colorado in the early 1990s. The state passed something called Amendment 2, which was a change to the Colorado Constitution that took away anti-discrimination protections for gay people. It was a controversial and deeply divisive moment in Colorado history, and when Barbra Streisand, who was one of the most famous entertainers in the world at the time, found out about it, she made a very public statement. She called the people of Colorado a bunch of hicks. She announced she would never visit the state again. Parker and Stone are both from Colorado. They grew up there. They love the place. And hearing one of the most powerful celebrities in Hollywood publicly insult their home state and the people in it was not something they forgot. On top of that, Parker has said in interviews that he finds Barbra Streisand's singing voice genuinely annoying, and that this played a direct role in how the episode was written. So when it came time to do a celebrity episode, they didn't just want to make fun of Streisand. They wanted to, in their own words, make her portrayal as sick and disgusting as possible. And they succeeded. The episode opens with the boys going on a school field trip to an archaeological dig. Eric Cartman finds a strange stone triangle buried in the ground, decides it's worthless, and throws it away. Kyle picks it up. An archaeologist examines it and identifies the writing on it as Anasazi, a real ancient Native American civilization. Kyle appears on the news to talk about the discovery. This is where things go wrong. Because Barbra Streisand sees the news report, she has been searching for this triangle for years. It turns out that the triangle is one half of an ancient relic called the Diamond of Pantheos. The other half she already owns. And if she combines the two, something terrible happens. Leonard Maltin, yes, the film critic Leonard Maltin, shows up in South Park and tracks down Chef to warn him. He explains the situation. Streisand's mother was a jackal. Her father was an insurance salesman. She is evil, she is dangerous, and if she gets that triangle, she will become the most terrifying creature to ever walk the earth. His name for this creature? Mecha Streisand. Streisand herself shows up at the boys' bus stop in disguise. She acts friendly and offers them money for the triangle, convincing Cartman, who cannot resist the promise of cash, to drag the others along to her mountain home to complete the deal. The boys arrive at what is essentially a luxury fortress in the mountains, and the moment they're inside, Streisand drops the act completely. She ties the boys up, she uses medieval medieval torture devices on them, and then, in what is perhaps the most specific detail Parker and Stone included, she starts singing at them. Her off-key, painful singing is depicted as a genuine form of torture. The boys can't take it. Eventually, Cartman breaks and hands over the triangle. Streisand combines the two pieces to form the Diamond of Pantheos. A beam of energy hits her. She begins chanting in Japanese, and then, right in front of everyone, she transforms. She becomes Mecha Streisand. If you've ever watched old Japanese monster movies, Godzilla, Gamera, Mothra, you'll immediately understand what you're looking at. Mecha Streisand is a direct parody of Mecha Godzilla, a giant mechanical monster from those films. Except this version has Barbra Streisand's signature hair on top. She is enormous. She is mechanical. She stomps through South Park, destroying everything in her path. Buildings collapse, citizens flee. The whole town is under attack from a giant robotic version of one of the most famous singers in American history. Leonard Maltin transforms himself into a giant robot in the style of Ultraman to fight her. He loses badly. Sidney Poitier, the legendary actor, transforms into a giant fire-breathing turtle in the style of Gamera. He also loses. South Park seems completely finished, and then Robert Smith arrives. Robert Smith is the lead singer of The Cure, a British rock band that Trey Parker has loved since he was a teenager. Parker has said that getting Robert Smith involved in this episode was a lifelong dream of his. The way they made it happen? The South Park team tracked Smith down when The Cure were performing on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno in October of 1997. They got him to record his lines over the phone in a studio in San Jose. Parker asked Smith to express emotion and put feeling into the lines, but Smith, who had not been given the full script and had no idea what was happening, read everything in a completely flat, deadpan voice. Parker used the first take of every single line, exactly as recorded. Smith transforms into a giant moth, a direct reference to Mothra from the Godzilla films. He engages Mecha Streisand in a massive battle, eventually punching her directly in her nose. In the South Park universe, Streisand's nose is her weak point. Smith knocks the Diamond of Pantheos free from her body, and Mecha Streisand, defeated, is hurled into outer space. When Smith walks off into the sunset, a version of a song by The Cure plays over the scene. Kyle shouts after him, "Disintegration is the best album ever." This line was based on Parker's own genuine opinion of The Cure's 1989 album, Disintegration, which he has talked about loving in multiple interviews. Robert Smith later said in an interview that hearing that line was his happiest moment. He even misremembered which boy said it, but the sentiment was real. The episode ends on a funny note. Kyle's little brother Ike finds the discarded diamond, picks it up, and transforms into a giant mecha Ike, with the boys looking terrified at the horizon. Now, the real-world response to all of this is important, because it shows exactly how accurate the portrait of Streisand was. Parker and Stone had depicted her as someone obsessed with power, someone who cannot stand being mocked, someone who would respond to being made fun of by making the situation worse. And Barbra Streisand responded to the episode in exactly the way a person obsessed with their image would. She spoke to Mirabella magazine in May of 1998, just a few months after the episode aired, and said that while she enjoyed satire and parody, she wondered whether shows like South Park added to the cynicism and negativity in culture, especially for children. Parker and Stone's response was immediate. In the very next season, for the season 2 Halloween episode called Spooky Fish, Comedy Central ran an advertisement telling viewers the episode would air in spooky vision, something so terrifying it couldn't even be described. When the episode aired, it was revealed that spooky vision simply meant Barbra Streisand's face was plastered in all 4 corners of the screen for the entire episode. Her face was also used for scene transitions. Every single cut to a new scene was framed with her image. They never let it go. The episode drew 5.4 million viewers on its original broadcast in February of 1998. At the time, that was a record high for South Park, more viewers than any episode the show had ever aired. That record held until 2001, when Scott Tenorman Must Die broke it with an even bigger audience. The ratings alone told you something. America was watching, and what America saw was something it had never really seen before. A major celebrity not just being made fun of, but being made into a literal monster. Not a flawed person, not an out-of-touch rich person, a monster, a villain, a creature who kidnaps children and tortures them with her singing voice, and wants to use an ancient relic to conquer the world. There's something important to understand about why this worked as comedy and as cultural commentary. Barbra Streisand was, at the time, one of the most untouchable figures in Hollywood. She was a multi-decade legend. She had Oscars, Grammys, Emmys, and Tony Awards. She was the kind of celebrity who had genuine political influence, who rubbed shoulders with presidents, who could make public statements about entire states full of people and face almost no pushback. She was the definition of a protected celebrity. And two guys from Colorado, working with paper cutout animation on a budget that most Hollywood productions would consider embarrassing, took her and turned her into a giant robotic dinosaur with a weak nose. That's the core of what makes the Mecha Streisand episode historically significant. It wasn't just funny, it was a statement, a declaration of what this show was going to be and who it was going to be willing to go after. Nobody was too big, nobody was too famous, nobody was too important to end up in South Park as something ridiculous. Barbra Streisand had called the people of Colorado hicks and promised never to come back. Parker and Stone responded by making sure that every time someone hears her name, there is now a chance they picture a giant mechanical monster getting punched in the nose by a moth version of the lead singer of The Cure. That's how you destroy a celebrity ego. And this was just the first episode, season 1. The show was barely 6 months old. The Streisand episode established the rules. It showed the audience what South Park was capable of when its creators had genuine feelings about a target. But the truly savage stuff, the kind that didn't just turn a celebrity into a cartoon monster, but instead held up a mirror to who they really were and let them destroy themselves in front of everyone, that was still coming. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously, and none of those later episodes would shake the country quite as hard as a little season 9 episode about a very famous actor who could not stop hiding in a closet. Section 2. Tom Cruise won't come out of the closet. The episode that changed television. There are episodes of television that make people laugh. There are episodes that make people think. And then there are episodes that cause real consequences in the real world. Episodes that get pulled from broadcast, that cost people their jobs, that generate death threats, that spark debates about free speech on the floor of actual newsrooms. Trapped in the Closet is all of those things at once. It is the most consequential celebrity takedown South Park has ever produced. Not just because of what it said on screen, but because of everything that happened after. Let's start at the beginning. The episode is season 9, episode 12. It aired on November 16th, 2005, and it opens with something deceptively ordinary. Stan Marsh is trying to save up money for a new bike. He decides not to go laser tagging with his friends so he can hold on to his cash. While walking around alone, he comes across a group of Scientologists running a booth offering free personality tests. Stan takes the test. The auditor tells him he is deeply depressed and could really use some help. Stan asks how much the help costs. He ends up spending his entire bike money on something called a Thetan reading. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, Scientology is a real church founded by a science fiction writer named L. Ron Hubbard in the 1950s. It involves a belief system built around the idea that humans carry invisible spiritual baggage called Thetans, which can be measured and cleared through specific church processes. The church has a reputation for being extremely secretive about its higher-level beliefs, and extremely aggressive toward anyone who criticizes it. It has taken governments to court. It has sued journalists. It has a long and well-documented history of going after anyone who causes it problems. Parker and Stone knew all of this when they made the episode. They made it anyway. In fact, they seem to make it specifically because of that reputation. When Stan's Thetan reading comes back, the results are so high, so far off the charts, that the head of the Scientology organization is called in personally. He sits Stan down and tells him something remarkable. Stan's Thetan levels match only one other person who has ever been tested in the history of the church. That person was L. Ron Hubbard himself. The conclusion, delivered with complete seriousness, is that Stan Marsh, a 10-year-old boy from a small mountain town in Colorado, is the reincarnation of Scientology's founder. This sets off a chain of events that would define the episode. Word spreads. Scientologists from all over the world converge on Stan's house. And among them, showing up with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious figures, is one of the most famous Scientologists in the world, Tom Cruise. Cruise sneaks into Stan's bedroom and sits there waiting for him, eager to meet what he believes to be the reincarnation of the man who founded his entire belief system. He is practically vibrating with excitement. He wants Stan's approval more than anything, and when Stan arrives, Cruise asks him, directly and sincerely, what he thinks of his movies. Stan thinks for a moment and gives his honest answer. He says Cruise is okay, not great, not as good as Leonardo DiCaprio, not as good as Gene Hackman, not even as good as, and this is a direct quote from the episode, the guy who played Napoleon Dynamite. Tom Cruise's reaction to this is to completely fall apart. He goes into hysterics. He starts crying. He is devastated in a way that is so extreme and so disproportionate that it becomes immediately, obviously funny. And then he does the thing that would define the episode and follow him forever. He walks into Stan's bedroom closet and refuses to come out. This is where the episode finds its comic engine. For the rest of the episode, the running joke, repeated over and over with perfect timing, is that Tom Cruise will not come out of the closet. Stan tells his dad tells his mom, people knock on the door and beg, the police show up. The joke is said in every possible way, with every possible inflection, by every possible character. Tom Cruise won't come out of the closet. Dad, Tom Cruise is in the closet and he won't come out. The line is constructed so that it works on two levels simultaneously. On the surface, it is about a man hiding in a piece of furniture. On a second level, it is a direct reference to long-running public rumors at the time about Tom Cruise's sexuality. Rumors that Cruise had been known to respond to with significant legal aggression. Parker and Stone could not directly address those rumors, but they found a way to address them anyway. And the way they did it was so creative and so perfectly constructed that it became one of the most memorable jokes in the show's history. Nicole Kidman is called in, Cruise's ex-wife, to try to talk him out. She stands outside the closet door and tells him gently that she won't think any differently of him, that nobody will, that he doesn't need to be in that closet anymore. He refuses to come out. John Travolta, another famous Scientologist, arrives to help. He ends up in the closet too. R. Kelly, the singer who released a song actually called Trapped in the Closet, is called in. He immediately begins singing about the situation in the style of his own song, pulling out a gun at random intervals. Then he goes into the closet as well. By the midpoint of the episode, Tom Cruise, John Travolta, and R. Kelly are all in the closet, and none of them will come out. But the episode is doing something else at the same time. While all of this is happening, Parker and Stone are presenting the actual beliefs of Scientology on screen. The head of the church sits Stan down and explains to him, in full detail, the story of Xenu, the central myth of Scientology's highest level teachings. Xenu was a ruler of a galactic confederation who, 75 million years ago, transported billions of people to Earth in spacecraft resembling DC-8 airplanes, stacked them around volcanoes, and destroyed them with hydrogen bombs. The souls of these people, called body thetans, are said to attach to living humans and cause spiritual problems that only Scientology's processes can address. This information was, at the time, something the Church of Scientology worked extremely hard to keep secret. It was only shared with members who had spent years and significant amounts of money reaching the higher levels of the church. And here it was, being broadcast on basic cable to millions of viewers, with a disclaimer displayed at the bottom of the screen in plain text that read, "This is what Scientologists actually believe." The disclaimer was necessary because Parker and Stone knew the material sounded so bizarre that audiences might assume it was something they had invented for comedic purposes. It was not invented. Every detail presented in that sequence was taken directly from the actual documented beliefs of the church. By the end of the episode, Stan decides he doesn't want to lead Scientology. He tells the gathered followers that the whole thing is a scam. Tom Cruise, Travolta, and R. Kelly finally emerge from the closet, not because they've had a change of heart, but because they're furious at Stan for calling their religion fake. Cruise tells Stan he made him look stupid and threatens to sue him in England. Stan responds with what would become one of the episode's most quoted lines. "Go ahead, sue me." The closing credits roll. Every single name, cast, crew, writers, animators, everyone, is listed as either John Smith or Jane Smith. Trey Parker is John Smith. Matt Stone is John Smith. Every person who worked on the episode is John Smith or Jane Smith. This was done deliberately and openly as a preemptive measure against the Church of Scientology and its known habit of targeting individuals connected to anything critical of the organization. By making everyone on the show anonymous in the credits, Parker and Stone were protecting their entire team. TV Guide later ranked this episode number 17 on its list of the top 100 television episodes of all time. The San Francisco Chronicle wrote that Parker and Stone probably hit their zenith with this episode. An academic journal on religion analyzed it in a published paper. It was included in Comedy Central's own list of 10 South Park episodes that changed the world. But the real story of this episode is what happened off screen. The episode aired in November of 2005. A few months later, in early 2006, Comedy Central scheduled a rebroadcast. The rebroadcast was pulled. Reports began circulating that Tom Cruise had threatened to refuse to do press for Mission Impossible 3, a film being released released by Paramount Pictures. Paramount was owned at the time by Viacom, the same company that owned Comedy Central. The suggestion was that Cruise had used his leverage over a major film release to pressure the network into pulling the episode. Cruise and his representatives denied any involvement. Parker and Stone publicly doubted those denials. Parker was quoted saying, "Tom Cruise has done more for South Park than anyone I think in the world." He added that the controversy had been like having a publicist working for free. The attention was enormous. Comedy Central did eventually rebroadcast the episode several months later, in July of 2006. Stone reportedly said that if the episode had not been put back on air, they would have had serious issues with the network and would not have continued working with them. But the damage to one specific relationship was already done. Isaac Hayes was the voice of Chef, one of South Park's most beloved recurring characters. He had been with the show since the beginning. He was a legendary soul musician, the man behind the theme to Shaft. He was also a practicing Scientologist. After the Trapped in the Closet episode aired, a statement was issued in Hayes' name, announcing that he was leaving South Park. The statement criticized the show for what it called inappropriate treatment of religious beliefs and spiritual convictions. The problem with this story is what came out later. Isaac Hayes suffered a stroke in January of 2006, just before that statement was issued. His son, Isaac Hayes III, confirmed in a 2016 interview that his father was in no condition to quit anything on his own. The son stated that the decision must have come from one of Hayes' personal assistants, all of whom were Scientologists, who issued the resignation on Hayes' behalf without his consent while he was incapacitated. Hayes died in 2008. He never returned to the show. Parker and Stone responded to his departure the only way they knew how. They wrote Chef out of the show in the very next episode after his departure. Chef was said to have returned from time with a group called the Super Adventure Club, behaving strangely. At the end of the episode, in a scene that was deliberately constructed to be as extreme as possible, Chef fell off a bridge, was struck by lightning, was burned, was impaled, and was mauled to death by both a mountain lion and a grizzly bear. Then he was resurrected as a Darth Vader type villain by the episode's antagonists. The character was voiced throughout using recordings of Hayes from previous episodes spliced together. Parker and Stone made clear they had no hard feelings toward Hayes himself, only toward the organization that they felt had taken him away. The long shadow of Trapped in the Closet stretched well into the future. Tom Cruise appeared again in the season 14 two-part episode 200 and 201, where he organized every celebrity South Park had ever mocked into a class action lawsuit. He was still in his closet in one scene, still refusing to come out. The joke had become permanent. What makes this episode stand apart from every other celebrity takedown the show has ever done is that it operated on multiple levels at once. It was funny, genuinely brilliantly funny, with a joke structure that could be repeated endlessly without getting old. It was culturally brave in a way that almost nothing else on television was at the time. It exposed information that a major organization had spent enormous resources keeping secret. It cost the show one of its most beloved characters, and it demonstrated in real time exactly what it had set out to satirize: that Tom Cruise, like his character in the episode, could not handle being told he was anything less than extraordinary, and would go to significant lengths to make the joke go away. The joke did not go away. 20 years later, Tom Cruise won't come out of the closet remains one of the most recognizable punchlines in the history of animated television. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But as massive as the Tom Cruise episode was, and as much chaos as it caused in the real world, the next celebrity target on this list caused a completely different kind of chaos. Because while Tom Cruise responded to South Park by trying to fight back, the next celebrity on our list responded by doing exactly what the show predicted he would do. He didn't understand the joke. He never understood the joke. And his inability to understand a very simple joke about fish sticks is what turned him from one of the biggest names in music into something else entirely. Section 3. Kanye West is a gay fish, the punchline that proved itself right. There is a very specific kind of comedy that only works when the target helps you write it. A joke that lands once is funny. A joke where the person being made fun of reacts in real life exactly the way the show predicted they would react. That is something different entirely. That is prophecy. And the Fish Sticks episode of South Park, which aired on April 8th, 2009, is the single clearest example in the show's history of a joke that became more true the more the target tried to deny it. To understand why this episode works the way it does, you have to understand where it came from, because the origin story of this joke is almost as funny as the joke itself. Trey Parker and Matt Stone were on a writer's retreat in Seattle. A man named Bill Hader was with them. Bill Hader is a comedian and actor who had been working as a writing consultant for South Park since season 12. The group went on a small tour of the city. At one point, they ended up near a body of water where they they could watch salmon jumping up a salmon ladder. While standing there watching the fish, someone, Matt Stone, made a joke. What if one of the salmon was dressed like the motorcycle daredevil Evel Knievel, just launching himself up the ladder like a stunt? Everyone laughed. And then the conversation kept going, the way conversations do when creative people are standing around with nothing to do. Somehow, the salmon wearing the Evel Knievel outfit reminded them of something. Kanye West had made a music video for his song Touch the Sky from his album Late Registration. In that video, Kanye himself dressed up like Evel Knievel and jumped a rocket over the Grand Canyon. He called the character Evil Kanyevel. So now they were thinking about Kanye West dressed as a stuntman. And then someone made a different joke. What if the salmon had a fish stick? And then the homophone clicked. Fish stick, fish stick. Do you like fish sticks? Do you like putting fish sticks in your mouth? What are you, a gay fish? Bill Hader, telling this story years later, described what happened next. Trey Parker Googled the joke immediately. He was convinced someone must have made it before. It seemed too obvious, too simple. He searched and searched. Nobody had ever made that joke, not once. It had never existed before that moment by the salmon ladder in Seattle. On the 4-hour car ride back from wherever they had been, Stone and Parker kept telling each other the joke, back and forth, over and over. The van driver they had hired was, by all accounts, extremely unhappy about this. Hader described the driver's expression as someone deeply regretting taking the job, but Parker and Stone could not stop. They found it that funny. And then someone asked the key question: who, among all the famous people in the world, would be the one person who absolutely would not get this joke? Who has an ego so big and a sense of humor about themselves so small that a joke this simple, a joke that every single other person on earth immediately understands, would sail completely over their head? Everyone in the car immediately said the same name, Kanye West. This is important. They did not pick Kanye West because they had something personal against him. They picked him because the logic was perfect. At that point in 2009, Kanye West was already famous for calling himself a genius in interviews, for interrupting award shows, for posting long, angry rants online, for being completely unable to take any kind of criticism or mockery without responding in the most extreme possible way. He was, in the creative team's collective opinion, the one person alive who would look at a joke understood by every human being and respond by saying he didn't get it, while insisting that made him smarter than everyone else. The episode itself is built on two parallel stories that mirror each other beautifully. The first story involves Jimmy Valmer and Eric Cartman. Jimmy is a kid who stutters and uses crutches, and he is working on material for his comedy routine. Cartman comes over to his house, asks for a snack, and Jimmy offers him fish sticks from the freezer. This leads Jimmy to accidentally create the joke. Do you like fish sticks? Yeah. Do you like putting fish sticks in your mouth? Yeah. What are you, a gay fish? The joke is simple. It is dumb. It is a pun on fish sticks, and it is immediately, obviously funny to literally everyone who hears it. The joke spreads across South Park instantly. Then it spreads across the country. Every talk show is doing the fish sticks joke. Jay Leno does it, David Letterman does it, Conan O'Brien does it, Jimmy Kimmel does it, Ellen DeGeneres does it. Every comedian in America is doing the fish sticks joke. The whole country is laughing. At the same time, Cartman is starting to rewrite history in his own mind. Cartman has a problem that the show uses brilliantly in this episode. His ego is so enormous that he cannot accept that he played almost no role in creating the joke. He was barely even there. Jimmy came up with it essentially alone. But as the episode goes on, Cartman's version of events becomes more and more elaborate. In his memory, he contributed more and more. Then he saved Jimmy's life. Then he slayed a dragon. Then he burned entire armies with fire from his hands like a superhero. Each time we see his flashback, it has grown larger and more ridiculous. Kyle watches all of this and identifies exactly what is happening. Cartman's ego is so broken that it actually rewrites his memories to protect itself. He does not know he is lying. He genuinely believes in his bones that he came up with the fish sticks joke. And Kyle tells him this directly. Your ego is so messed up that it twists everything around to put you at the center, and you actually believe your own version of things. This is the mirror, because on the other side of the episode, the exact same thing is happening with Kanye West. But worse, Kanye hears the fish sticks joke and he does not laugh. He does not understand it, not even a little. He thinks people are not making a wordplay joke. He thinks they are literally, personally calling him a homosexual fish. He thinks this is an attack aimed specifically at him. And his response is not to say, I don't get it, or can someone explain the pun? His response is rage. He holds press conferences denying that he is a fish. He gets a doctor to examine him and confirm that he has no gills, therefore he cannot be a fish. He goes on television to make statements about this. Everyone tries to explain the joke to him. The more they explain, the angrier he gets. He becomes convinced convinced that whoever wrote the joke must have a personal vendetta against him. Then comedian Carlos Mencia goes on Conan O'Brien's show and claims credit for the joke. Kanye immediately goes to Mencia's house. He and his crew tie Mencia to a chair and beat him with baseball bats. Kanye beheads him with a baseball bat swing. He wants answers. He wants to know why someone would start these rumors about him. Mencia cannot help him because Mencia is now dead. Kanye then finds out that Jimmy and Cartman were the actual creators of the joke. He shows up at Jimmy's house with his crew and takes them both hostage. He holds guns on them and demands they explain why they called him a gay fish. And this is where the episode brings both storylines together, because while Kanye has Jimmy and Cartman at gunpoint demanding an explanation, Jimmy and Cartman are too busy arguing with each other about who created the joke to even notice the guns. Cartman is stealing credit. Jimmy is pushing back. They are completely absorbed in their own ego battle. And Kanye, watching this argument, somehow arrives at a completely wrong conclusion. He misreads what they are saying. He thinks their argument is proof that he is genuinely, actually, a gay fish. That he has been living in denial his whole life. That everyone who has been calling him a gay fish was not making a joke. They were trying to help him understand something true about himself. He accepts it completely. The episode ends with Kanye in a wetsuit, walking to the end of the Santa Monica Pier and diving into the ocean. A song begins playing. It is called Gay Fish. It is a parody of Kanye's own song Heartless from his album 808s and Heartbreak. Trey Parker sings the whole thing using heavy auto-tune, and he had to deliberately sing off-key in order to get the auto-tune effect to sound the way he wanted. Parker said in interviews that you have to be a bad singer on purpose for the tool to process it the way it needs to. The video that plays over the song shows Kanye happily swimming through the ocean, kissing fish, humping a grouper, living his best life as a gay fish at the bottom of the sea. The morning after the episode aired, the full 2.5-minute version of the Gay Fish song was made available for free download on the official South Park website. The deleted ending, which was animated but cut from the final episode, showed a different conclusion. Two members of the US Coast Guard find Kanye's drowned, bloated body in the ocean. One of them closes Kanye's eyes. His adventures under the sea were apparently hallucinations experienced just before death. Parker and Stone decided this was too dark for the final cut and went with the happier ending instead. Now here is where the real world becomes the joke. The real Kanye West's reaction to this episode proved, immediately and permanently, that Parker and Stone had been exactly right about him. He posted on his blog, in capital letters, a statement that included the line, "I got a long road ahead of me to make people believe I'm not actually a huge douche, but I'm up for the challenge." I'm sure the writers at South Park are really nice people in real life. He was publicly acknowledging the episode. He was not laughing at it. He was treating it as a reputation problem to be managed, a PR crisis. He was responding to a fish sticks joke the same way someone responds to a serious accusation. This is, of course, exactly what his cartoon version did. The cartoon Kanye held press conferences. The real Kanye posted long statements. The cartoon Kanye got a doctor to confirm he was not a fish. The real Kanye wrote paragraphs about how he was not actually a douche. And it did not stop there. Kanye kept referencing the episode years later. On his 2010 album My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, in a song called Gorgeous, he rapped, "Choke a South Park writer with a fish dick." On his 2011 album Watch the Throne, in a song called Made in America, he referenced South Park laughing at him. In a 2021 leaked demo for a song called Life of the Party, he referenced fish sticks again and told the South Park team to kiss a specific part of his anatomy. As one person on Reddit noted in a post that went viral multiple times over the years, the fact that they predicted his reaction inside the episode and he still reacted exactly the way they predicted is just so Kanye that you could not make it up. Bill Hader, who helped create the joke, explained in interviews that the entire point was never really about fish at all. The joke was about ego. Specifically, it was about the kind of ego that is so fragile and so enormous at the same time that it cannot survive a simple pun. A person with a healthy relationship with themselves hears a dumb joke and laughs. A person whose entire identity is built around being a genius, being the voice of a generation, being someone too important and too significant to be made fun of. That person hears the same dumb joke and turns it into a crisis. Cartman had the same problem. His ego also rewrote his memories to protect him. The episode is not just a Kanye takedown. It is an argument that ego blindness is the same whether you are a famous rapper or a chubby kid in Colorado. The mechanics are identical. The results are equally ridiculous. South Park would return to Kanye West in season 14's episodes 200 and 201, where he shows up still in his gay fish outfit, still identified as a recovering gay fish. And in season 17, in an episode called The Hobbit, he would return again. this time in a completely different but equally humiliating situation. Both times, the show found ways to use the same joke engine: Kanye's inability to see himself clearly and the chaos that results from that inability. The Fish Sticks episode is, by almost every measure, a perfect piece of comedy construction. The joke is simple, the structure is elegant. The two storylines, Cartman rewriting history and Kanye refusing to understand a pun, are doing the exact same thing from different angles. And the real-world confirmation that they had perfectly predicted their target's behavior gave the episode a second life that most television moments never get. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But as funny as it is to watch a man who calls himself a genius spend years being outsmarted by a wordplay joke about fish, the next celebrity on our list faced something completely different. Because Bono wasn't just mocked for his ego. He was told that his ego was not a personality flaw he had developed over time. It was something much more fundamental than that. He was told he was not a person at all. Section 4. Bono is not just full of crap. He literally is crap. There is a certain kind of famous person that the world has always had complicated feelings about. The kind who does genuinely good things, raises money for the poor, campaigns for debt relief, shows up at world summits to argue on behalf of people who have nothing, but does all of it with such an overwhelming need to be seen doing it, such a desperate hunger for recognition and applause, that the good deeds start to feel less like generosity and more like a performance. A person who cannot simply do good. They have to be seen doing good. They have to be thanked for doing good. They have to win at doing good. And the moment someone else threatens to be better at doing good than they are, the mask slips and what is underneath is not a saint at all. That person, in the world of South Park, is Bono. The episode is called More Crap. It is season 11, episode 9. It aired on October 10th, 2007, and it is, on the surface, one of the most disgusting episodes South Park has ever produced. The entire plot revolves around bowel movements. The whole thing is about poop. It is deeply, enthusiastically, unapologetically about poop. Parker and Stone were so aware of how low the subject matter was that they built an entire running joke around the fact that they had just won an Emmy Award. Every single time something particularly gross happens on screen during the episode, a graphic appears in the corner. It shows a spinning Emmy Award. Underneath it, in clean professional text, it reads, Emmy Award-winning series. The joke is them winking at the audience. Yes, we just won television's highest honor. Yes, we are using it to frame a scene about the world's largest piece of human waste. We are aware of the contradiction. We find it hilarious. But underneath all of that deliberate grossness is one of the sharpest, most precise celebrity takedowns the show has ever constructed. Because the argument the episode is making about Bono is not just that he is annoying, or that he is out of touch, or that his humanitarian work is self-promotional. The argument goes much further than that. The episode argues that Bono's need to be number one is not a character flaw. It is not something he developed over years of fame. It is something fundamental to what he is. Something biological. Something he was born with. Or more accurately, something he was born as. Let's go through what actually happens. Stan's father, Randy Marsh, has not had a bowel movement in 3 weeks. This is established at the very start of the episode with absolutely no subtlety whatsoever. He has been eating at P.F. Chang's, a real American restaurant chain, almost exclusively, and the combination of food choices and time has created a situation that requires medical attention. His doctor prescribes him a laxative. What follows is described in the episode as an extremely painful but ultimately successful experience. The result is a piece of waste so enormous that Randy is genuinely amazed by it. He shows it to his friends at the local bar. They are also amazed. Someone suggests he should apply for a world record. The Guinness Book of World Records, which is a real book that tracks extraordinary achievements of all kinds, redirects him to a fictional organization called the European Fecal Standards and Measurements Board. The board uses a unit of measurement called the Couric, which is named after real journalist Katie Couric, in a running gag that the show had been building across several episodes. Randy's result is measured and confirmed. He has broken the world record for the largest bowel movement in recorded history. And then comes the complication. The previous record holder, it turns out, is Bono. Bono is not happy about this. He is not gracious. He is not the kind, globally conscious humanitarian who campaigns for African debt relief and shows up at the United Nations to plead for the world's poorest people. In this episode, Bono is petty, competitive, and furious. He immediately produces a photograph of his own waist and submits it to the board. board, claiming to have just broken Randy's record. The board confirms it. Randy is stripped of his title. This sends Randy into a depression that his friends can only pull him out of by convincing him to try again. He goes back to P.F. Chang's. He eats there every day for 3 weeks. An ultrasound shows that the contents of his body have reached approximately 14 curricks in weight. He is ready. Bono finds out that Randy is attempting to reclaim the record and intervenes directly. He contacts the European Fecal Standards and Measurements Board and demands that Randy must produce his result in person in Zurich in front of the entire board with professional witnesses present. The board agrees to this, even though these rules were never applied to Bono himself. Bono submitted a photograph. Randy has to travel internationally and perform in front of a committee. Randy's doctor tells him he cannot travel, so Stan steps in. Stan goes to Bono's enormous mansion and tries to appeal to him directly. He explains that his father is a regular person who has never won anything in his life, that this record, absurd as it is, would mean something real to him, that it is the one thing he has ever had a chance to win. And he asks Bono, a man who has more awards, more honors, more recognition than almost any human being alive, if he can just let Randy have this one small thing. Bono's response is immediate and violent. He cannot stand the idea of being number 2. Not in anything, not even in this. He attacks Stan verbally and physically threatens him, insisting that he will not allow anyone to take the number 1 position from him, in any category, under any circumstances. Stan cannot understand it. He pushes back with a line that cuts directly to the heart of the episode's argument. He tells Bono that he already has everything. Every award, every honor, every possible recognition. His band is one of the most successful in history. He is knighted. He is celebrated. He has a beautiful wife and a brilliant career and more money than most countries. At some point, Stan asks, "Can't you just be okay with being number 2? Can't you just step back and let someone else have something?" Bono's answer, delivered in absolute seriousness, is that he cannot feel whole unless he is number 1. The idea of being second at anything, even at something as meaningless as a bowel movement competition, causes him genuine psychological pain. Bono's butler, watching all of this, makes a decision. He pulls Stan aside and tells him there is something he needs to understand about Bono, something that explains everything. He takes Stan to Zurich, to the headquarters of the European Fecal Standards and Measurements Board, to hear the truth from the board's founder directly. And here is the revelation. Bono did not take the world's biggest bowel movement in 1960. Bono is the world's biggest bowel movement from 1960. The head of the board explains it plainly. In 1960, he himself produced a piece of waste so large, so unprecedented, that he could not bring himself to simply flush it away. He was too proud of it. He was so proud of it that he raised it. He nurtured it. He fed it from his own chest. And it grew. It developed. It became a human being. It became Bono. Bono is not a person who took a record-breaking crap. Bono is the crap. He was born as a crap, raised as a crap, and has spent his entire life being a crap while everyone around him treated him as something extraordinary. This, the board member explains, is why Bono can do so much good in the world and still seem like such a piece of crap. Both things are simultaneously true. He is capable of organizing massive benefit concerts, lobbying world leaders, and raising billions of dollars for people in need. And he is also, literally and biologically, a piece of waste. The contradiction that the public has always sensed about him, the tension between the good he does and the overwhelming self-importance with which he does it, is resolved by the revelation that he is not a flawed person. He is simply a crap that became famous. When Bono discovers that Stan has learned the truth, he breaks down. The aggressive, competitive, number 1 obsessed man dissolves completely. His butler produces him like a toddler. He is breastfed by the board's founder. He regresses into something infantile and helpless. The man who could not tolerate being number 2 in any context is, when stripped of his defenses, just what he always was, something small and raw and in need of comfort. Randy, meanwhile, produces his final attempt at the record in front of the full board. The result is so large that it physically lifts him off the toilet seat. The board confirms a weight of over 100 curricks. Randy is the new record holder. An official tries to present him with the Emmy Award graphic that has been appearing throughout the episode. He grabs it and sticks it directly into Randy's achievement. The episode ends there. Now, some important context about the timing of this episode. It aired in October of 2007. Just a few weeks before, South Park had won an actual primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program for the season 10 episode, Make Love, Not Warcraft. So when the spinning Emmy Award graphic appeared on screen during the grossest moments of more crap, it was not just a joke about prestige television in general. It was the show specifically making fun of its own recent genuine honor. They had just won the highest award in American television, and they chose to celebrate that achievement by attaching it to a storyline about competitive defecation and a celebrity being revealed to be a living piece of human waste. The episode was written and directed entirely by Trey Parker. It is one of the very few South Park episodes in which Cartman, Kyle, and Kenny do not appear at all. The episode follows Randy and Stan almost exclusively, which gives it an unusual shape. Most South Park episodes balance between the adult world and the boys' world. This one leans almost entirely into Randy's story, using Stan only as the person who goes to confront Bono and uncovers the truth. The crew of the documentary film The King of Kong, a 2007 film about competitive video gaming, were consulted and responded positively when they found out their documentary had inspired the structure of the episode. The film's director said they considered it a compliment that South Park had borrowed the shape of their story. The structure of the episode, a regular person achieving something remarkable, a powerful figure refusing to let them have it, the regular person fighting back, is taken directly from the competitive gaming documentary and transplanted onto a bowel movement competition. What makes the Bono episode one of the most memorable celebrity takedowns in South Park history is not just the gross out factor, it is the completeness of the argument. The show is not saying that Bono is a hypocrite. It is not saying that his charity work is fake. It is not saying that he should stop campaigning for global debt relief or stop organizing benefit concerts. The show is saying something more brutal than any of those things. It is saying that no matter how much good Bono does, no matter how many summits he attends or how many people he helps, the ego at the center of all of it is so enormous and so impossible for him to be separated from that it poisons everything. He cannot do good quietly. He cannot win gracefully. He cannot lose at all. And that is not a personality trait he can change with effort or therapy or self-reflection, because he is not a person who developed these traits. He is the traits. He was born them. He is made of them. The show takes what everyone has always vaguely felt about a certain kind of do-gooder celebrity, the nagging sense that the generosity and the ego are not two separate things, but one single thing wearing a humanitarian costume, and makes it literal. Bono is not a good man with a flaw. He is the flaw itself, shaped like a man. It is mean. It is absurd. It is constructed with remarkable internal logic. And it is, in the tradition of the very best South Park celebrity episodes, absolutely impossible to unsee once you have seen it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But as precise as the Bono takedown is, and as perfectly as it dissects the specific kind of ego that hides behind philanthropy, the next episode on our list goes somewhere darker. Because while Bono was revealed to be something ridiculous, the next celebrity was revealed to be something tragic. And the episode that featured her was not primarily about making you laugh at her. It was about making you feel sick for ever having laughed at her at all. Section 5. Britney Spears and the Ritual Sacrifice, the darkest celebrity episode South Park ever made. There are episodes of television that are funny. There are episodes that are smart. And then there are episodes that make you feel genuinely uncomfortable about yourself by the time the credits roll. Not because the show did something wrong, but because the show held up a mirror and made you look at something you had been doing without thinking about it. Something the whole country had been doing. Something that felt normal until someone pointed at it directly and said, "Look at what you are actually participating in." Britney's New Look is that episode. It is Season 12, Episode 2. It aired on March 19th, 2008, and it is, without question, the most complicated and most emotionally difficult celebrity episode South Park has ever produced. It is disguised as a cruel mockery of Britney Spears. It is actually one of the most sympathetic portrayals of a celebrity the show has ever created. And the difference between those two things is the entire point. To understand the episode fully, you need to remember what was happening in early 2008. Britney Spears had spent the previous year going through what the media described, endlessly and gleefully, as a complete public breakdown. She had shaved her own head at a hair salon while photographers stood outside taking pictures. She had attacked a paparazzi vehicle with an umbrella. She had lost custody of her children. She had been photographed in states of obvious distress. She had been admitted to hospitals. She had been followed everywhere she went by enormous groups of photographers who made their living selling images of her at her worst moments. And the public had consumed every single piece of it. The photos sold for massive amounts of money. The coverage was constant. The jokes were everywhere. Late-night television, gossip websites, tabloid magazines, and casual conversation all treated Britney Spears' visible suffering as entertainment, as something to be enjoyed, as content. Parker and Stone were watching all of this, and what they saw was not a celebrity getting what she deserved. What they saw was something ancient and ugly dressed up in modern clothing. The episode opens at Stan's house. Randy is trying to get the boys to watch a live political debate between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. The debate is interrupted by a breaking news bulletin. Britney Spears has been spotted near South Park. A photographer has just been paid $100,000 for a picture of her urinating on a ladybug while camping. Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Butters immediately forget the presidential debate entirely. They do not care about who will run the country, they care about Britney Spears. Specifically, they care about getting a photograph of her doing something embarrassing so they can sell it and make money. Butters is the only one who objects. He says she has been through enough and that they should leave her alone. Nobody listens to him. Butters is dressed in a squirrel costume for the scheme because the plan involves getting Britney to defecate on what appears to be a squirrel. This tells you everything you need to know about how the world is treating her. The boys find out which hotel Britney is staying at. Security will not let them up to her room. So Stan and Kyle tell security that they are Britney's children and have come to see their mother. Security lets them through. This detail matters. Britney Spears had recently lost custody of her children in real life. Using her love for them as the key to get past her defenses is not just a plot device. It is a specific cruelty, and the show knows it. When Britney sees them at her hotel room door, she is overjoyed. She believes her children have actually come to see her. She is warm and emotional and happy in a way she has not been for a long time. And then she realizes the truth. These are not her kids. They are just boys who came to take her picture. The look that crosses her face in that moment is one of the most quietly devastating things in the episode. The show does not linger on it for laughs. It simply shows it. And then Britney, who has nothing left, who has been hunted and photographed and ridiculed for so long that she cannot take any more, picks up a shotgun and shoots herself in the head. She survives, but most of her skull is gone. The top 2/3 of her head no longer exist. She is alive, but she can barely function. She cannot speak, she cannot see properly, she cannot understand what is happening to her. Cartman and Butters flee immediately. Stan and Kyle stay, and in the hospital, looking at what they have contributed to, they make a promise to make it right. They are going to help her. They are going to protect her. What follows is the rest of the episode trying and failing to do exactly that. Britney's manager shows up almost immediately and smuggles her out of the hospital. He takes her to a recording studio and forces her to make a comeback song. Stan and Kyle protest. They say this will only make everything worse. The manager ignores them. The song is recorded. Britney is booked to perform at the MTV Video Music Awards. The performance is a disaster. The crowd watches Britney struggle on stage and picks apart everything about her appearance. Her weight, her hair, her movements. Critics write about how obviously she is lip syncing. Stan looks at the reviews and says she doesn't have any lips. Nobody seems to notice or care that most of her skull is missing. The specific targeted cruelty of the crowd, examining every flaw, finding every imperfection, demanding she be perfect while making perfection impossible, continues without pause even after she has literally shot away most of her own head. Stan and Kyle come up with a plan. They are going to take Britney to the North Pole, far enough away from everything that the media cannot reach her, that she can have some peace. They get her onto a train. Kyle disguises himself as Britney to distract the photographers while Stan takes her north. It almost works, but the train stops at a small village, and what is waiting at that village is the entire population of South Park. Randy is there, Sharon is there, Sheila is there, Gerald, Jimbo, Officer Bar Brady, all of them. Kyle is in the crowd too, having been caught. He runs to Stan and Britney. The crowd surrounds them. Kyle demands to know why this has to happen, why Britney has to die, and then the explanation comes. The episode parodies a famous horror short story called The Lottery, written by Shirley Jackson. In that story, a small American town holds a lottery every year. The person who draws the losing ticket is stoned to death by their neighbors. The reason given is tradition. The town needs it. Something bad will happen if they stop. The sacrifice is required. In the South Park version, one of the paparazzi explains it simply. The American people need a sacrifice for a good harvest. In ancient time, towns would pick someone by lottery and stone them to death. But modern civilized people do not like doing their own dirty work anymore. So now the system works differently. You build a person up into a celebrity. You make them an icon. And then you use the media to drive them to the edge and let them destroy themselves. You do not throw the stones yourself. You just keep taking pictures until the person is gone. And the crowd does exactly that. They photograph Britney until she collapses and dies. Months later, the residents of South Park are at a supermarket talking about what a good corn harvest it has been. A news broadcast comes on the television above the checkout aisle. It announces that Miley Cyrus, star of Hannah Montana, is becoming enormously popular and everyone loves her. The townspeople look at the screen. Their expressions change. They begin to hum. The same slow, rhythmic chant that preceded Britney's death. The cycle is beginning again. There is already a new target being built up, and Stan and Kyle, who spent the entire episode trying to stop it, look at each other and after a long moment, quietly join in the chant. They have given up. There is no stopping it. The episode ends there. There are a few things about the real-world context of this episode that make it even more striking. First, the real Britney Spears was reportedly not happy with the episode. This is understandable on the surface. It depicts her shooting herself, losing most of her head, and being photographed to death. But the interesting part is that the episode is, at its core, entirely on her side. The crowd that kills her contains all of South Park's regular adult characters. The people who are mocked in the episode are not Britney. They are the audiences, the paparazzi, the managers, the media companies, and the entertainment machine that consumed her suffering for profit. Second, Trey Parker and Matt Stone chose to structure the episode around the lottery very deliberately. The story by Shirley Jackson was published in 1948. When it first appeared in the New Yorker magazine, it generated more letters from readers than anything the magazine had ever published. Most of those letters were angry. People were deeply disturbed by the story because it argued that ordinary, normal, nice people are capable of monstrous cruelty when the cruelty is wrapped in enough tradition and social expectation to feel normal. Parker and Stone recognized that the media coverage of Britney Spears was the same argument in a different costume. Third, the episode predicted something. The final image, the crowd beginning to target Miley Cyrus as the next sacrifice, was aired in 2008, just as Cyrus was at the absolute peak of her Hannah Montana fame. What followed in the next few years, as Cyrus grew up and the media turned on her in predictable and documented ways, gave the episode's ending a meaning it did not quite have when it first aired. The show had identified the machine and described exactly how it worked. It built someone up, then it tore them apart, then it found someone new. What makes this episode different from every other celebrity episode South Park has made is that it is not about ego at all. Most of the other episodes on this list are about destroying the ego of a famous person who had too much of it. Britney Spears was not destroyed because she had too much ego. She was destroyed because the system needed someone to destroy, and she was the person standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. The episode is not a takedown of a celebrity. It is a takedown of everyone watching the celebrity, including, by implication, the audience watching South Park. You laughed at Britney. You clicked the links. You bought the magazines. You watched the coverage. The corn harvest was good this year. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And the next person on our list had a very different kind of ego destroyed. Because while Britney was a victim of the machine, the man who comes next was the machine itself. He was not hunted by the media. He used the media. He controlled his image with meticulous precision. He built a reputation over decades as one of the most beloved and respected directors in Hollywood history. And then, two fourth graders from Colorado explained to the entire world that he had done something unforgivable to a beloved fictional archaeologist in a leather jacket, and that he would never be allowed to forget it. Section 6. Mel Gibson is a sadomasochistic lunatic, and that is the generous take. There is a specific type of celebrity that South Park has always found irresistible. Not just the famous and the powerful, not just the wealthy and the out of touch. The specific type that Parker and Stone seem to find most interesting is the one who has built their entire public identity around something sacred and serious, who has used that sacred and serious identity to demand a level of respect that puts them above criticism, and who turns out, underneath all of it, to be something completely unhinged. Mel Gibson was that person in 2004. The episode is called The Passion of the Jew. It is season 8, episode 3. It aired on March 31st, 2004, and what makes it remarkable, beyond everything else about it, is the timing. Gibson had spent the previous 2 years building the release of his film, The Passion of the Christ, into one of the most discussed and debated cultural events in recent American history. The film depicted the final hours of Jesus Christ's life with an extreme level of graphic violence. It was marketed directly to Christian communities. It was praised by religious leaders. It became one of the highest grossing films of all time. It made enormous amounts of money and sparked enormous amounts of conversation about faith, history, religion, and anti-Semitism. And Parker and Stone, watching all of this, had a simple question. Who actually is Mel Gibson? They had an answer, and they delivered it while the film was still in theaters before Gibson's real-life behavior had caught up with his public image. This is important. The 2006 arrest, where Gibson was pulled over for drunk driving and launched into an anti-Semitic tirade at the police officers, had not happened yet. The later incidents, the public meltdowns and phone call recordings and mounting evidence of a man in serious psychological trouble, were all still in the future. Parker and Stone essentially looked at the available evidence and concluded, in 2004, that Mel Gibson was deeply, profoundly unhinged. 2 years later, the rest of the world would find out they were right. The episode runs 3 parallel stories at the same time, and all 3 are doing something different. The first story belongs to Stan and Kenny. They go to see The Passion of the Christ because Cartman has been pressuring everyone to see it. Their reaction when they come out of the theater is simple and immediate. They thought it sucked. Not for theological reasons, not for political reasons. They thought it was a bad film. They want their $18 back. This sets off a journey to get a refund that takes them to Mel Gibson's actual house in Malibu. The decision to have 2 10-year-old boys travel to a celebrity's private home to demand a refund for a movie ticket is already absurd enough. What they find when they arrive is what makes the story unforgettable. Mel Gibson is completely out of his mind. He is in his house, alone, babbling to himself. When Stan and Kenny approach him and explain they want their money back, Gibson straps himself to a rack and tells them that no matter how much they torture him, he will not give them their money. Stan and Kenny are confused. They do not want to torture him, they just want $18. Gibson does not hear this. He is lost in something else entirely. He seems almost disappointed that they are not hurting him. Then he starts doing Daffy Duck impressions. He runs around the house making cartoon sounds. He chases them from room to room. Stan eventually gets smart and just takes the $18 directly from Gibson's wallet while he is distracted. Stan and Kenny run for a bus back to South Park. Gibson, wearing face paint from his film Braveheart, chases after the bus in a large tanker truck straight out of his older film Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. He is screaming out the window. He is honking the horn. He is shouting the Klingon word Qapla', which means success or victory in the Star Trek universe, and which he also used in Parker and Stone's own film Team America: World Police. He chases the bus all the way back to South Park. The second story belongs to Kyle. Kyle went and saw The Passion of the Christ on his own, and unlike Stan and Kenny, who simply thought it was bad, Kyle had a much more complicated reaction. The film's violent depiction of Jewish figures in the story of the crucifixion shook him deeply. He began having nightmares. He felt enormous guilt about his Jewish heritage. He went to Cartman's house and told him, in the words that Cartman had been waiting his whole life to hear, that he was right all along. This single moment, Kyle admitting that Cartman was right, sends Cartman into a state of pure joy. He immediately begins organizing what he frames as a fan club for The Passion of the Christ. He dresses in a brown uniform that looks exactly like something from the Nazi period. He practices anti-Semitic speeches in German in front of his mirror. He recruits a crowd of completely sincere Christians who think they are joining a faith-based appreciation group and have no idea they are being organized into something else entirely. Cartman marches this crowd through South Park chanting German phrases. The crowd believes the German words are Aramaic, the ancient language spoken in the film. They have no idea what they are actually saying. The phrases translate to things like, "It is time to clean," and "We must exterminate the Jews." A passing rabbi watches them march past with an expression of growing horror. This storyline is doing something very specific. It is pointing out that the cultural environment around the Passion of the Christ, the fervent devotion, and the sense that anyone who criticized it was attacking Christianity itself, created exactly the kind of conditions that allowed someone like Cartman to exploit sincere people for genuinely dangerous purposes. The film became a shield. If you questioned the film, you were questioned for questioning Christianity. And inside that shield, a smirking Cartman in a brown uniform could march a crowd of good faith believers through the street chanting things they did not understand. The third story belongs to Kyle working through his guilt with Father Maxey at the local church. Father Maxey gives Kyle a perspective that becomes the moral center of the entire episode. He points out that the Bible actually provides very few details about the crucifixion, that the Passion of the Christ is not the Bible, that the detailed, prolonged depiction of violence was a creative choice by its director, that focusing on how Jesus died rather than what Jesus taught is how people thought during the Dark Ages, and that this kind of thinking historically led to terrible things being done to Jewish people throughout history. This is not a throwaway line. It is the thesis of the entire episode. Stan eventually delivers a version of this same argument to the gathered crowd at the end of the episode, and it works. The crowd disperses, Cartman's rally falls apart, Kyle recovers, and then Gibson arrives in South Park, having chased the bus all the way from Malibu. His truck crashes into the theater where The Passion of the Christ is playing and explodes. Gibson emerges from the wreckage completely unharmed. He walks into the gathered crowd, a crowd that includes both Cartman's followers and the Jewish congregation who had come to protest the film. He begins ranting in a way that makes no sense. He smears his own waste on the side of a nearby building. He begs people to torture him. Nobody does. He is delighted and horrified in equal measure by everything happening around him. And then, in the episode's final and most deliberately disgusting moment, he gleefully defecates on Cartman's face. This causes two things to happen simultaneously. Cartman's followers scatter, their illusions completely destroyed. And Kyle, watching this person who made the film that shook him to his core, suddenly feels all his guilt dissolve. He says to Stan, "If this lunatic made the film that I built all that guilt around, then maybe the guilt was never about anything real." The New York Times praised the episode. The Anti-Defamation League praised it. The Jewish Daily Forward, a Jewish newspaper, called it perhaps the most biting critique of The Passion of the Christ to date. These are not organizations that typically endorse South Park's approach to comedy. The fact that all three praised the same episode tells you something about how accurately it had identified the real tensions around the film's release. There is one more layer to this episode that is worth understanding. Parker and Stone developed and wrote it while The Passion of the Christ was still in theaters. They turned it around in their 6-day production window and aired it before the cultural conversation had moved on. This is the production schedule advantage that no other show in television has ever had. They can respond to a cultural moment while the moment is still happening. But the element that makes the Gibson portrayal historically significant is not just the comic image of a man smearing waste on buildings and doing Daffy Duck impressions. It is the fact that they made this portrayal before the world knew. In 2004, Mel Gibson was still largely understood as the beloved director of Braveheart, the star of Lethal Weapon, a man of public religious conviction who had spent his own money making a serious film about his faith. The public version of Mel Gibson was not yet the version the world would meet in 2006 and the years that followed. Parker and Stone looked at what was available and reached a conclusion. They saw a filmmaker who made a 2-hour movie consisting primarily of extreme violence inflicted on a single person. They saw a man who had made Braveheart, which also featured extensive brutality. They connected those dots and decided that whatever Mel Gibson said his religious motivations were, the actual driving force was something different, something that found pleasure in pain and suffering, something they depicted as a full and complete love of being hurt, of watching hurt, of making hurt into art and selling it as devotion. 2 years later, when Gibson was arrested and the recording of his behavior was made public, and the phone call recordings followed, and the full picture of who this person was behind the public image came into focus, people remembered the episode. Parker had essentially drawn a cartoon portrait of what was underneath the surface and aired it on basic cable while the world was still buying tickets to the film. The episode is not just funny because of Daffy Duck impressions and tanker truck chases and the image of a man being defecated on by a Hollywood director. It is funny because of the confidence behind it, the willingness to say this is who this person actually is before the evidence caught up. It remains one of the most precise pieces of celebrity prediction the show has ever produced. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while Gibson was taken apart through a combination of cartoon madness and real theological argument, the next celebrity on our list was taken apart for something that had nothing to do with religion or politics or artistic vision at all. She was taken apart for being exactly what she said she was. And the episode that did it did not need to exaggerate anything or invent anything or make any predictions about future behavior. It simply pointed at the image she had constructed and asked one question. Is this really what we want little girls to grow up wanting to be? Section 7. Paris Hilton opens a store called Stupid Spoiled Whore, and everyone loves it. There is a specific moment in American cultural history where something shifts, where what was once considered embarrassing becomes aspirational, where the things that used to mark someone as having poor judgment or low standards become, overnight, the things that everyone wants, where an entire generation of young girls looks at a famous person and decides that what that person represents is not something to be avoided, but something to be copied as closely as possible. That moment happened in the early 2000s, and the person at the center of it was Paris Hilton. The episode is called Stupid Spoiled Whore Video Playset. It is Season 8, Episode 12. It aired on December 1st, 2004, and unlike most South Park celebrity episodes, which are primarily interested in the ego or the behavior of the celebrity being mocked, this episode is interested in something larger and more disturbing. It is interested in what a celebrity like Paris Hilton does to the people around her, specifically what she does to children, and even more specifically, what she does to little girls who are at the age where they are just beginning to figure out what kind of person they want to become. This episode is interested in something larger and more disturbing. It is interested in what a celebrity like Paris Hilton does to the people around her, specifically what she does to children, and even more specifically, what she does to little girls who are at the age where they are just beginning to figure out what kind of person they want to become. To understand why Parker and Stone made this episode, you need to understand who Paris Hilton was in 2004. She was the heiress to the Hilton Hotel fortune. She was famous primarily for being famous. She had appeared in a reality television show called The Simple Life. She had a private video that had been leaked and widely distributed earlier that year. She had a small dog named Tinkerbell that she carried everywhere. She was in tabloids constantly. She was on magazine covers constantly. She was, at that particular moment in American pop culture, one of the most visible people in the country, and she was visible in a very specific way. Everything about her public image was built around wealth, provocative behavior, and the idea that being desired and being reckless and being spoiled were not flaws, but achievements. Things to be proud of. Things that made you worthy of attention and admiration. Parker and Stone had daughters of their own by the time they made this episode. Both of them have spoken about this in interviews. They said that if you imagine having a daughter and thinking about what kind of role models she has available to her, and you look at what Paris Hilton represented at that moment, something starts to feel genuinely wrong. Not mildly uncomfortable, actually wrong. The episode does not hide what it thinks about this. It announces it in the title. The story begins with the girls in 4th grade at South Park Elementary discovering that Paris Hilton is coming to South Park to open a new store. The store is called Stupid Spoiled Whore. The product line includes a toy set called the Stupid Spoiled Whore Video Playset. The commercial for this toy set describes its contents. It comes with a night vision filter, fake money, a losable cell phone, and 16 hits of ecstasy. This is a direct reference to Paris Hilton's real sex tape, which was filmed in night vision, and to the general public perception of her lifestyle. Every girl in 4th grade immediately wants to be a stupid, spoiled whore. They buy the products. They dress in the store's clothing line. They talk to boys in ways that make the boys deeply uncomfortable. They plan a stupid, spoiled whore party at BB's house. They are enthusiastic and fully committed to the new identity the store has given them. Wendy Testaberger is the only holdout. Wendy is one of the smartest kids at school. She is class president. She is appalled by what she is watching happen to her friends and says so clearly. Her reward for this position is immediate social exclusion. The other girls tell her she is not a stupid, spoiled whore, and therefore she is not invited to the party. Being too smart and too principled is, in this world, a disqualifying condition for friendship. Wendy's attempts to get adults to address the problem run into a wall immediately. Her father goes to the Stupid Spoiled Whore store to investigate, and within minutes has been completely won over by the women working there, who use a combination of flattery and accusation to convince him that trying to shut the store down makes him oppressive to women. He ends the conversation by promising to make Wendy the stupidest, most spoiled whore of them all. The adults have failed entirely. Meanwhile, Paris Hilton herself is dealing with a personal crisis. Her dog Tinkerbell has shot itself in the head inside her limousine. The implication is clear and is made even clearer in the next few minutes of the episode. A flashback reveals the various fates of Paris Hilton's previous pets. A poodle that hanged itself, a cat that slashed its wrists, a spaniel that performed a ritual act of honorable self-destruction with a sword. Every single animal she has ever owned has chosen death over continued proximity to her. The joke is brutal and specific. It is not that her pets died from neglect or accident. They made deliberate, reasoned decisions. Being owned by Paris Hilton was so miserable that death was the rational response. Grieving and needing a replacement companion, Paris spots Butters walking down the street and decides she wants him. She instructs her driver to acquire him. The driver explains that she cannot simply take a child from the street. Paris throws a full tantrum until she gets her way. She puts Butters in a bear costume, renames him Mr. Biggles, and begins treating him as her pet. When Paris discovers that Butters has parents, she goes to their home and makes them an offer. She will pay $200 million for him. Butters' parents, who are normally depicted as rigidly conventional and moralistic, immediately enter negotiations. They hold out for $250 million. They are genuinely prepared to sell their son. The episode does not draw attention to this or treat it as a shocking revelation. It simply shows it, matter-of-factly, and moves on. The implication is that the kind of money Paris Hilton represents is enough to make even the most ordinary parents calculate the value of their child in cash. Butters eventually escapes by running away before the sale is finalized. His parents are furious when they find out, not because they were worried about him, but because they are not going to get the money. Back at school, Mr. Slave, one of the show's most deliberately outrageous recurring characters, agrees to help Wendy address the situation. Mr. Slave is a man whose entire existence is defined by extremely adult behavior. He is, by any conventional standard, the last person who should be giving a speech about healthy values to young girls. But this is exactly what happens, and it is played completely straight. Mr. Slave stands in front of the 4th grade girls and explains that even he, someone with absolutely no claim to conventional morality, knows that Paris Hilton is not a role model, that her lifestyle is empty, that she represents nothing worth aspiring to. Paris Hilton shows up at this moment and objects. What follows is a competition. Not a conventional competition, a whore-off. Paris Hilton and Mr. Slave face off on a public stage in front of the entire town of South Park. The competition escalates. Paris Hilton, in the episode's most grotesque moment, loses badly. The consequence of her loss is that she is physically inserted into Mr. Slave's body. She is last seen inside his digestive system, encountering a talking frog creature from an earlier episode who sets her on a quest. Mr. Slave then delivers a speech to the assembled crowd. He explains that young girls need to be taught that people like Paris Hilton are supposed to be despised. That if parents do not teach this to their children, nobody else will. That the absence of this lesson creates the world the episode has been showing for the past 20 minutes. Now, the real-world response to this episode is fascinating for several reasons. When Paris Hilton was asked about the episode in 2005, she said she had not seen it, but that imitation was the most flattering thing, so whatever people said, she just laughed about it. Matt Stone's public response to this statement was immediate. He said, "That shows just how messed up she is. That is terrible that she is flattered by it." What Stone was pointing at was something the episode itself had been building toward. The episode's argument was that Paris Hilton had so thoroughly embraced being a target, so completely absorbed mockery and controversy into her brand, that there was no way to hurt her reputation because her reputation was built on exactly the kind of attention that mockery generates. She could not be shamed because shame required a gap between who you were and who you wanted people to think you were. Paris Hilton had closed that gap entirely. She was exactly what everyone said she was, and she was proud of it. In 2023, almost 2 decades after the episode aired, Paris Hilton published a memoir. In it, she wrote that she did actually watch the episode. She said she felt genuinely hurt by it. Specifically, she mentioned the scene involving her dog being shot and the running joke about her coughing up a certain substance. She described her original public response as a performance, something she had learned to do to protect herself. Her actual response was pain. This detail does not erase the episode's argument, but it adds a layer to it. The show attacked a public image so effectively constructed that even the person inside the image had learned to respond to attacks on it from behind a wall. The performance of being unbothered was itself part of the performance of being Paris Hilton. Parker and Stone acknowledged in DVD commentary for the episode that their feelings about the target were genuine and personal in a way that went beyond typical South Park satire. They used language that made clear this was not simply a comedy exercise. They were genuinely angry about what this specific person represented and what that representation was doing to young girls who were looking for someone to model themselves after. The episode's moral argument is clean and simple. It does not say that Paris Hilton is a bad person for existing. It does not say that her lifestyle choices are anyone's business but her own. It says that when a person builds a brand around certain behaviors and then markets that brand directly to children through toys and stores and media appearances, the content of that brand becomes everyone's business. Wendy's father is told that opposing the store makes him oppressive to women. The episode points out that this argument, applied to a product line aimed at 4th grade girls, is something that needs to be looked at carefully. Mr. Slave, of all people, is the one who sees it clearly. A man who has no standing whatsoever to talk about conventional values looks at what Paris Hilton represents and says, "Even I know this is wrong." That is the joke, and the joke contains the argument. argument, and the argument has not dated at all. What makes this episode sit differently from the Mel Gibson episode, or the Kanye episode, or the Bono episode, is that it is not primarily about a famous person's ego. It is about a famous person's influence. Gibson's ego was dangerous in a specific and somewhat contained way. Kanye's ego was ridiculous and self-destructive. Bono's ego was contradictory. Paris Hilton's influence was spreading outward into schools and playgrounds and bedroom walls, shaping how young girls understood what they were supposed to want to be. That is a different kind of problem, and it required a different kind of episode to address it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But if Paris Hilton represented a celebrity whose influence spread outward without her fully controlling it, the next story on our list is about something almost the opposite. It is about a celebrity who controlled his image with total precision for decades, who was careful and protected and beloved, and who made one film that Parker and Stone decided to treat not as a creative failure, but as something much more serious. Something they depicted in the most literal way possible as an act of violence against a fictional character that millions of people loved, and the filmmaker had absolutely no way to respond to it that would not make everything worse. Section 8. 200 celebrities sue South Park, and Muhammad is the least of their problems. There is a specific kind of pressure that builds up over time. Not a single explosion, but a slow accumulation. Parker and Stone had spent 13 years by 2010 putting famous people into their show and doing whatever they wanted with those famous people. Barbra Streisand had become a giant robot. Tom Cruise had locked himself in a closet. Kanye West had become a gay fish. Bono had turned out to literally be a piece of waste. Britney Spears had been sacrificed by a mob. Mel Gibson had chased a bus in face paint. Paris Hilton had been absorbed into a human body. None of these celebrities had been able to do anything about it. But what if they all got together? That is the premise of 200 and 201, Season 14, Episodes 5 and 6. They aired on April 14th and April 21st, 2010, and they are, in terms of sheer ambition and the number of moving parts, unlike anything Parker and Stone had attempted before or have attempted since. These two episodes function as a single story, a culmination, a reunion of nearly every famous person the show had ever destroyed, all of them arriving together in South Park with a single shared purpose. They want what every celebrity who had ever been humiliated by the show wanted but could never get alone. They want to stop being made fun of. The story begins at a fancy restaurant where Cartman has taken his mother for her birthday. Sitting nearby is Tom Cruise, eating quietly and trying to enjoy his meal. Cartman, being Cartman, immediately begins doing an impression of Tom Cruise to entertain his mother and the surrounding tables. He does not do a flattering impression. Cruise hears it. He puts down his fork. He stands up and tells Cartman that he has had enough. He is going to sue the entire town of South Park for all the times it has made fun of him. But Cruise does not stop there. He goes further. He makes a proposition to every other celebrity who has been mocked by South Park. He organizes them. He builds a coalition. He takes the case to a lawyer and files a class action lawsuit against South Park on behalf of 200 celebrities. The list of celebrities who join the lawsuit is enormous. It includes almost every famous person the show has featured over its entire run. Cartman, Kyle, Stan, and Kenny watch from the school window as a convoy of limousines arrives in town carrying celebrity after celebrity, all of them with grievances, all of them ready to go to court. The town of South Park is faced with an impossible situation. The lawsuit is for an amount of money that would bankrupt the entire community. They cannot fight it. They cannot ignore it. They have to negotiate. Tom Cruise steps forward with the terms. South Park can make all of this go away by delivering one single thing. He wants Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, to be physically brought to South Park and handed over to the celebrity coalition. This is where the episode becomes something much larger than a celebrity satire. Muhammad had appeared in South Park before. In the Season 5 episode Super Best Friends, which aired in 2001, Muhammad appeared as a member of a group of religious figures who fight evil together. This was before the Danish cartoon controversy of 2005 and 2006, in which cartoonists who drew depictions of Muhammad received death threats. After that controversy, the cultural environment around depicting Muhammad in any visual form changed dramatically. Parker and Stone had tried to address this directly in two earlier Season 10 episodes called Cartoon Wars. In those episodes, they argued that if you are not willing to mock everyone equally, you are not actually practicing free expression. You are practicing selective courage, which is not courage at all. Comedy Central had agreed to air those episodes, but had censored the actual depiction of Muhammad. Now, in 200 and 201, they were returning to the subject. The entire plot of the two-part story hinges on Muhammad being physically present in South Park. The celebrities want him not for religious reasons, but because they believe Muhammad possesses a specific property that will solve their problem permanently. Muhammad, according to the episode's logic, cannot be made fun of. He is the one public figure in the world who is completely immune to mockery, because the threat of violence surrounding any depiction of him is so extreme that no one will do it. The celebrities want his power. If they can extract whatever quality Muhammad has that makes him untouchable and transfer it to themselves, they will never have to worry about South Park or any other source of mockery again. This is the core argument of the two episodes wrapped inside a comedy plot. The show is saying, the only reason any person or institution is truly safe from satire is because someone has made criticizing them dangerous. That is not respect, that is fear. And fear is not a legitimate foundation for protection from criticism. The boys are sent on a mission to find Muhammad. He has been hiding in protective custody, moving from safe house to safe house, terrified of being depicted visually anywhere. They eventually locate him in a warehouse where he has been living inside a large metal bear costume to prevent anyone from seeing him. He agrees to come to South Park. Meanwhile, the celebrity coalition is not just waiting patiently. Several of them have their own agendas running inside the larger lawsuit. There is a subplot involving Cartman discovering through a genetic testing service that his father may be a specific famous person. This subplot runs through both episodes and pays off in a way that is entirely about Cartman's character rather than about the celebrity involved. Cartman's obsessive need to know who he is and where he comes from has been a thread running through the show since season 2, and these episodes use the celebrity story as a framework to advance it. There is also the issue of the Gingers, a group of red-haired children who Cartman had manipulated in an earlier episode called Ginger Kids, have evolved into a threatening faction. They arrive in South Park with their own demands, complicating the already complicated negotiations. When Muhammad finally arrives in South Park, still inside the bear costume, Tom Cruise and the celebrities gather to receive him. The transfer of his untouchability is supposed to happen through a machine that extracts it and distributes it to all 200 celebrities at once. This is when Comedy Central intervened. In the second episode, 201, Comedy Central censored every single mention of Muhammad's name, not just visual depictions. The name itself was silenced with a long audio bleep every time any character said it. Additionally, a speech delivered by Kyle at the end of the episode, which Parker and Stone described as the thematic conclusion of the entire story, was censored entirely. The speech was replaced with a bleep so long that it covered every word Kyle said. Parker and Stone were furious. They issued a public statement saying that Comedy Central had made the decision completely without their input and against their wishes. They said the censorship was a demonstration of exactly the point the episodes had been trying to make, that fear had been allowed to function as a reason to silence speech. That by bleeping Muhammad's name but leaving every other name in the show untouched, the network had illustrated the precise problem the show was addressing. The speech Kyle gives at the end, the one that was entirely censored, has since been confirmed by Parker and Stone to have contained a straightforward argument about intimidation and satire. It was not provocative in any way that justified the censorship. It was the moral conclusion of the story. Removing it meant that both episodes, which were structured to build toward that conclusion, now ended without the ending Parker and Stone had written. The episodes have never been made available on the show's official streaming platform, South Park Studios, in their uncensored form. When the rest of the show's catalog was uploaded for streaming, 200 and 201 were left off entirely. They remain the only episodes in the show's history that are not officially available for viewing. You cannot stream them. You cannot purchase them digitally. Parker and Stone have not re-released them. They exist as a gap in the catalog, which is itself a kind of statement. The real-world response was intense. A website had posted what it described as a warning to Parker and Stone after the first episode aired, noting what had happened to a filmmaker named Theo Van Gogh, who was murdered in the Netherlands after making a film critical of the treatment of women in Islamic culture. Comedy Central cited concerns about safety when explaining their decision to censor the second episode. Parker and Stone said publicly that Comedy Central did not consult them before making this decision. Within the story itself, separate from everything happening around it, the celebrity satire continues throughout both episodes with the same energy as any other South Park two-parter. Tom Cruise is petty and self-important. The celebrity coalition is depicted as a collective of fragile egos who have banded together because they cannot individually survive survive being laughed at. The episode makes the point that the desire to be immune from criticism is not something unique to religious extremism. It is a universal celebrity instinct dressed up in different costumes. When the untouchability machine is activated and the quality is distributed to all 200 celebrities, it does not work the way they hoped. The episode resolves in a way that confirms the show's central belief about fame and mockery. The protection they wanted does not come from a machine or a lawsuit or a coalition. There is no protection. There never was. The moment you become famous enough to be worth mocking, you have entered a world where the only dignified response is to live with it. The celebrity lawsuit episodes are the closest Parker and Stone ever came to making a show about the show itself. Every previous celebrity episode had been self-contained. This one reached back through 14 seasons and pulled everyone in. It said, here is every person we have ever made fun of. Here is what they would do if they could, and here is why they cannot. The answer to why they cannot is the answer that runs through every episode in this collection. Because the moment you try to stop the laughter by threatening the people laughing, you confirm everything the laughter was saying about you. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. By 2010, Parker and Stone had destroyed hundreds of famous people across 14 seasons. But the next episode on our list is special for a different reason. It is about two celebrities who had already appeared in the show before and been made fun of before, and who came back in a later episode in a story that was not primarily about what they did or how they behaved, but about something much quieter and much more uncomfortable. It was about the image they asked the world to accept and what that image was doing to the people around them who were trying to live in reality. Section 9. Kim Kardashian is a hobbit, and Kanye West will not hear otherwise. There is a specific kind of lie that is different from a regular lie. A regular lie is when you say something false, knowing it is false. The specific kind of lie that is harder to deal with is when you take something false and repeat it so many times, in so many places, with so much confidence and so much money behind it, that the world around you begins to reshape itself to accommodate the false thing. When enough people go along with it, the false thing starts to feel true, and anyone who points out that it is still false starts to look like the problem. Parker and Stone built an entire episode around this idea in 2013. The episode is called The Hobbit. It is season 17, episode 10. It aired on December 11th, 2013, and it uses Kim Kardashian and Kanye West, who were at that point in a relationship and had just had their first child together, to make an argument about the difference between a manipulated image and reality, and what happens to ordinary people when they are forced to compete with an image that does not actually exist. To understand the episode fully, you need to understand what was happening culturally in 2013. Kim Kardashian had become one of the most photographed people on the planet. Every image of her that appeared in magazines, on covers, in advertisements, and on her own social media was heavily edited. Her shape, her skin, her proportions, all of it was altered in post-production to create a version of her that looked different from how she appeared in unedited photographs. This was not a secret exactly, but it was also not something that was openly discussed. The edited images were simply presented as real, and millions of people, including young girls, were looking at these images and comparing themselves to something that did not exist. The episode does not ease into this argument. It starts it in the first scene. Wendy Testaberger tells a boy at school that she thinks he is attractive. The boy tells her she is not hot enough for him. He says he prefers girls like Kim Kardashian. Wendy is hurt and confused. She goes home and looks at pictures of Kim Kardashian. She comes back the next day and tells the boy that Kim Kardashian is a hobbit. She does not mean this as an insult in the traditional sense. She means it literally, in terms of body proportions. She is making a factual observation that Kim Kardashian's real body type, as it appears in unedited photographs and in person, is short and wide with certain hobbit-like characteristics. This is a comparison to the Tolkien creatures from The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, who are depicted as small, stout, and broad. The school is immediately divided. Most kids think Wendy is being mean and are offended on Kim Kardashian's behalf. Wendy keeps insisting she is not being mean. She is simply telling the truth. She shows people unedited photographs of Kim Kardashian standing next to other people. She brings in visual evidence. She makes her case carefully and completely. Nobody wants to hear it. Kanye West, who is back in South Park for the first time since the gay fish episode, and who is explicitly described in this episode as a recovering gay fish, hears that someone has called his girlfriend a hobbit. He arrives at South Park Elementary to confront Wendy directly. He tells her that Kim is not a hobbit and demands she take it back. He is furious and certain and completely unwilling refusing to engage with any evidence she presents. This is where the episode begins doing something interesting with Kanye's character specifically. In the gay fish episode, Kanye was funny because he could not understand a simple joke. In this episode, the problem is different. Here, Kanye understands what a hobbit is. He knows the definition. He is not confused about the word. He is simply refusing to accept that it applies to his girlfriend, because accepting it would mean accepting something about reality that conflicts with the image he has decided to present to the world. Every time Wendy shows Kanye evidence, he rejects it. Every time she presents a logical argument, he shuts it down with emotional insistence. He is not confused. He is choosing not to see. And the episode makes clear that this choice has consequences beyond just Kanye's feelings, because the image of Kim Kardashian that Kanye is defending so aggressively is the same image that is being held up to ordinary girls as something they are supposed to look like. Wendy takes her case to the school counselor Mr. Mackey, to Principal Victoria, to her parents, and to anyone who will listen. Every adult in the episode fails her in exactly the same way the adults failed in the Paris Hilton episode almost a decade earlier. They tell her she is being hurtful. They tell her she needs to be kind. They tell her that even if what she is saying is technically true, saying it is not the right thing to do. The message Wendy receives from every authority figure is, the truth is less important than making people feel comfortable. Eventually, worn down and socially isolated and facing suspension from school, Wendy gives in. She goes to the school counselor's office, looks into the camera, and says that Kim Kardashian is not a hobbit, that she is a beautiful, strong woman, that calling her a hobbit was wrong and hurtful. The speech is delivered with zero emotion. Her face is completely flat. She is saying the words she has been told to say, and she does not believe a single one of them. Kanye is satisfied. He records the apology on his phone and posts it online. But the episode does not end there. It ends with the consequence of Wendy's surrender. In the final scene, the boy who originally told Wendy she was not attractive enough for him because she was not like Kim Kardashian is shown using an app on his phone. He is editing a photo of Wendy. He makes her waist smaller. He makes her hips different. He makes her skin smoother and her proportions closer to the edited images of Kim Kardashian that he has been looking at his whole life. When he finishes, he shows the edited photo to his friends and says that Wendy is actually pretty hot. He has made a fake version of Wendy and decided he likes the fake version. Wendy sees this happening. She watches boys passing around a version of her that does not exist. A version that could only exist if she were digitally altered to look like someone else entirely. And the expression on her face is not anger or sadness. It is something more complicated and more defeated than either of those things. The episode ends there. No speech, no reversal, no moral delivered by a character telling the audience what to think. Just Wendy watching boys prefer a fake version of her over the real one, and the camera holding on her face long enough for the weight of it to settle. This is a remarkably different ending for a South Park celebrity episode. Almost every other episode in the show's catalog ends with someone making a speech that summarizes the argument and then the story resolving, at least partially. The Britney episode ended with horror, but also with dark satirical distance. The Paris Hilton episode ended with Mr. Slave making a direct statement about values. Even the gay fish episode ended with Kanye finding something like peace in the ocean. The Hobbit ends without resolution. It ends with the problem still fully in place and nobody having stopped it. Parker and Stone said in interviews around the time of the episode that they were genuinely troubled by what photo editing was doing to how young people, especially young girls, understood their own appearance. That the images being held up as standards of beauty were increasingly images of people who had been digitally altered to a degree that made them physically impossible in real life. That asking real people to compare themselves to these images was not just unfair, but actively damaging. Kanye West's role in the episode is precise and thought through. He had appeared in the show before as someone who could not understand a joke. Here he appears as someone who can understand the truth but chooses not to accept it, because accepting it would require him to change the story he is telling. His girlfriend's image is part of his own image. Attacking the image attacks him, so the truth becomes the enemy. He is also, and this is important, not depicted as evil. He is depicted as someone who loves his partner, and who has decided that love means protecting the version of her that the world sees, even if that means attacking anyone who tries to point at the real version. This is a more complicated portrait than the show usually draws. Usually the target is simply wrong or selfish or deluded. Here the target is doing something recognizable, something a lot of people do. The episode just follows where that thing leads and shows what it costs. Kim Kardashian herself did not make any public statement about the episode at the time. Kanye West, who had responded publicly and personally to the Gay Fish episode years earlier, did not make any public statement about this one either. The absence of a response was itself noted by media at the time as significant. The episode was praised by critics and by people writing about media and body image. image. It was specifically noted as an unusual piece of television because it made a serious argument about a real and documented harm using comedy and a celebrity reference, and it had the discipline to not soften the ending. Wendy Testaberger, who also refused to go along with Paris Hilton in season 8, is once again the only person in South Park willing to say the true thing out loud. And once again, the world of the show punishes her for it. Not cruelly or dramatically, just quietly and completely. The way the world usually punishes people who say true things that make everyone else uncomfortable. The Hobbit remains one of the most emotionally restrained things Parker and Stone have ever made. It is funny throughout, but the final image sits with you in a way that most South Park endings do not. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while The Hobbit dealt with the quiet damage that celebrity images do to ordinary people, the next episode on our list is about something much louder. It is about two real members of a real royal family who left one of the most famous institutions in the world and then spent the following years telling the world in every format available to them about how much they had suffered. And Parker and Stone, watching all of this from Colorado, had a very specific response to the story being told. They thought it was not a story about suffering at all. They thought it was a story about something else entirely. Something they summed up in a single word that they put in the episode's title. Section 10. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle come to South Park to tell everyone how much they hate being famous. There is a specific kind of person who decides they no longer want to be in the public eye, and then announces this decision in front of as large an audience as possible. Who says they are tired of being watched and then makes sure that as many people as possible are watching when they say it? Who explains that they value their privacy and their peace and their family's safety, and then explains all of this in a book and in a documentary series and in a television interview watched by tens of millions of people, and in podcast episodes, and in speeches, and in public appearances at award shows and charity events and high-profile gatherings of exactly the kind of famous and powerful people that they said they were stepping away from? Parker and Stone had been watching this happen for several years before they made an episode about it. The episode is called The Worldwide Privacy Tour. It is season 26, episode 2. It aired on February 15th, 2023, and it takes one idea and builds an entire episode around it with a focus and a simplicity that makes it one of the cleaner pieces of celebrity satire the show has produced in its later seasons. The idea is this: you cannot simultaneously demand privacy and aggressively seek attention. These two things cancel each other out, and the more loudly and publicly you demand privacy, the more the demand itself becomes a performance for an audience, which means privacy is not actually what you want. What you want is to control the story. You want the attention, you just want it on your terms. To understand why Parker and Stone made this episode in 2023, you need to understand what Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had done in the years leading up to it. In 2020, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle announced they were stepping back from their roles as senior members of the British royal family. They said they wanted to live more privately and to be financially independent. They moved to California. They gave an interview to Oprah Winfrey in March 2021 that was watched by an enormous number of people around the world, in which they made serious allegations about the treatment they had received from the royal family. In December 2022, Netflix released a 6-part documentary series about their lives. In January 2023, Harry published a memoir called Spare, which became one of the fastest-selling non-fiction books in history, and which contained extensive private details about his family, his childhood, his time in the military, and his marriage. All of these things happened while Harry and Meghan were publicly and repeatedly describing themselves as people who wanted privacy above almost everything else. Parker and Stone noticed the gap between the stated desire and the actual behavior. They built their episode around that gap. The episode begins with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle arriving in South Park. They have come on what they are calling a worldwide privacy tour. They are traveling from town to town telling people about how much they value their privacy and how badly their privacy has been violated and how all they want is for people to leave them alone. They drive through South Park in a motorcade. They wave to the assembled crowd. They hold press conferences. They give speeches. They pose for photographs. They talk to journalists. They do everything that famous people who are actively seeking public attention do, and at every step they describe all of it as part of their mission to protect their privacy and live a quiet life. The town of South Park responds with complete sincerity. The residents are genuinely moved by Harry and Meghan's story. They are sympathetic and supportive. Randy Marsh, who functions in later seasons of the show as the primary vehicle for adult male delusion and self-contradiction, becomes one of their most devoted followers. He begins wearing a shirt with their faces on it. He cries openly during their speeches. He tells his neighbors that Harry and Meghan are the bravest, most most admirable people he has ever seen. The boys, who are watching all of this from the sidelines, are confused in the specific way that South Park children are often confused by adult behavior. Not because they cannot understand what Harry and Meghan are saying, but because what Harry and Meghan are saying does not match what Harry and Meghan are doing. Stan points this out in plain language. He says that they are driving through town in a motorcade, asking everyone to respect their privacy, that these two things do not go together. Nobody in the adult world of South Park hears this. The episode's main storyline involves Randy becoming so devoted to Harry and Meghan that he begins to see them as representatives of everything pure and honest about the desire to live simply and away from public judgment. He gets in a fight with his wife Sharon about it. He starts showing up at their events uninvited. He is, in short, a fan in the most devoted and irrational sense of the word, which is the episode's way of pointing out that the worldwide privacy tour is not actually driving people away from Harry and Meghan. It is making them more famous. It is generating more devotion. The privacy tour is a fame machine. The celebrity couple at the center of all this is drawn with a specific choice that is worth noting. The episode does not depict Harry and Meghan as villains. It does not accuse them of deliberate hypocrisy in the sense of knowing exactly what they are doing and doing it anyway for calculated reasons. Instead, they are depicted as people who have genuinely convinced themselves that what they are doing is consistent. That seeking attention to tell people you want no attention is not a contradiction. That the worldwide privacy tour is a real and sincere project. This is a more interesting comic choice than simply making them dishonest. Dishonest people who know they are dishonest are not as funny as people who have fully convinced themselves that the contradictory things they believe are actually compatible. Harry and Meghan in the episode are not winking at the camera. They believe in the privacy tour completely. They have no awareness of the joke they are living inside. A secondary plotline in the episode involves Cartman. Cartman has decided to claim that he is part of a group of people being persecuted, specifically to avoid consequences for his own behavior. He frames every criticism of him as a form of targeted harassment. He uses the language of victimhood as a shield against accountability. He is directly and deliberately paralleling the accusations that had been made in the media about Harry and Meghan's public statements, specifically the accusation that they were using claims of mistreatment to deflect criticism of their own choices and behavior. This parallel is not subtle. The episode wants you to see it. Cartman is the show's most reliable vehicle for satirizing a specific kind of manipulation, and here he is being used to reflect something the show sees in the celebrity couple's public strategy. The episode was released during the precise peak of public conversation about Harry and Meghan. The Netflix documentary had aired in December 2022. The book Spare had come out in January 2023. The episode aired in February 2023. Parker and Stone, using their production schedule that allows them to respond to current events within a week, put this episode out while the conversation it was responding to was still at its loudest. The real-world response split along the lines you would expect. People who were sympathetic to Harry and Meghan found the episode cruel and reductive. People who had been skeptical of the privacy tour found it accurate and satisfying. Parker and Stone did not respond publicly to either group. The episode does not take a position on the more serious allegations Harry and Meghan made about the royal family. It does not engage with the question of whether they were genuinely mistreated or whether the specific things they described actually happened. These questions are entirely outside the scope of what the episode is doing. What the episode is doing is much simpler and much more focused. It is pointing at a single observable behavior. The behavior of saying you want privacy in the most public way possible. And it is following that behavior to its logical conclusion. If you go on a worldwide privacy tour, you are not someone who wants privacy. You are someone who wants to be seen wanting privacy. These are completely different things. Harry and Meghan had accumulated an enormous amount of public sympathy in the period after they left the royal family. Large numbers of people believed their account of what had happened to them and felt genuine compassion for them. The episode is not attacking that sympathy or telling people their compassion is wrong. It is asking a different question entirely. It is asking whether the behavior being observed matches the story being told. When Randy Marsh cries at a press conference about privacy and then goes home and posts about it on social media and then tells all his neighbors about it and then buys a commemorative shirt, he is not a villain. He is a person who has been given a story that made him feel something real, and who cannot see that the story itself contains the proof that it is not quite what it claims to be. The episode ends with Harry and Meghan leaving South Park to continue the tour. They wave goodbye. The crowd cheers. Randy waves his shirt. The motorcade pulls away. Everyone is happy. Nothing has changed. The tour continues. Parker and Stone made 10 episodes about individual celebrities across the show's run, and then they made 2 episodes that stood back and looked at the whole picture. The next section does exactly that. It is not about any single celebrity, it is about the pattern, about what all these episodes from Mecha Streisand to the Worldwide Privacy Tour are actually doing when you line them up and look at them together, about what Parker and Stone were building, one famous person at a time, over 25 years of television. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously, and the pattern, when you see it clearly, turns out to be about something much larger than any individual celebrity who ever came through South Park and got taken apart. Section 11, The Machine That Eats Famous People. How South Park built the same episode 27 times. There is a moment that happens in almost every South Park celebrity episode. It is not a joke exactly, it is not a plot point, it is a specific kind of reveal. A moment where the mask comes off and you see what is underneath. And what is underneath is always something the celebrity in question would never want the world to see. Streisand transforms into a monster. Cruise locks himself in a closet. Kanye dives off a pier in a wetsuit. Gibson smears waste on a building. Hilton is absorbed into a human body. Harry and Meghan wave goodbye from a motorcade on a worldwide privacy tour. Each of these moments is different on the surface, but they are all doing the same thing. Parker and Stone, across 27 years of South Park, built what is essentially a single machine. They built it one episode at a time, adjusting it slightly for each new target, but the core structure never changed. Once you see the machine clearly, you cannot unsee it. And once you see it, you start to understand that the celebrity satire in South Park was never really about the celebrities at all. It was about something the celebrities represented, something they carried into the room with them every time they showed up on screen. The machine has 5 parts. They appear in almost every episode covered in this collection, sometimes in different order, sometimes compressed or expanded, but always present. The first part is the construction. Every celebrity episode begins by establishing what the famous person wants the world to believe about them. This is not done with a speech or an explanation. It is done by showing the gap between the public image and the reality that everyone quietly knows exists, but politely ignores. Barbra Streisand is presented as a powerful cultural figure who turns out to be a petty, controlling tyrant willing to torture children for a triangle. Tom Cruise is presented as a successful and serious actor who turns out to be so fragile that a child saying he is merely okay drives him into a literal closet. Bono is presented as a man of conscience and generosity who turns out to be, in the most literal reading the show can manage, a piece of waste. The construction phase is always generous. The show gives each celebrity the full weight of their public image before it starts dismantling it. This generosity is not kindness, it is architecture. The higher the pedestal, the further the fall. The show builds the pedestal carefully because it needs the height. The second part is the intrusion. Something from the world of ordinary South Park children collides with the celebrity's constructed image. Stan tells Tom Cruise he is just okay. Cartman hears Kyle say he was right. Randy produces a record-breaking result that displaces Bono from the top of a ranking. Wendy tells a boy that Kim Kardashian is a hobbit. Boys try to photograph Britney Spears. 2 10-year-olds travel to Mel Gibson's house to ask for a refund. The intrusion is always small. It is never an organized attack. It is never a calculated takedown. It is always something casual and ordinary that the celebrity's ego cannot survive. This is the show's central argument dressed as a plot device. The argument is that massive fame creates massive fragility. The more famous you become, the more you need the world to reflect your image back to you exactly as you want it reflected. The slightest deviation, a child saying you are just okay, a boy saying your girlfriend is a hobbit, a town producing a bigger piece of waste than you, becomes unbearable. The celebrity cannot absorb it. The ordinary person can. The collision between ordinary life and celebrity fragility is where every story begins. The third part is the escalation. The celebrity's response to the small, ordinary intrusion is always completely disproportionate. Tom Cruise does not simply disagree that Stan's opinion is wrong. He locks himself in a closet and refuses to come out. Kanye West does not simply say that he is not a gay fish and move on. He holds press conferences and kidnaps people and beheads a comedian, and eventually throws himself into the ocean. Mel Gibson does not simply refuse to give a refund. He chases a bus across the state in a tanker truck wearing face paint while screaming a Klingon word for victory. Paris Hilton does not simply ignore criticism of her store. She buys a child. The disproportionate response is always funny because of the gap between the scale of the original intrusion and the scale of the reaction, but it is also always revealing. The size of the response tells you exactly how much the celebrity needed the thing that was taken from them. Gibson needed the money back not because of the money, but because giving it back would mean admitting the product was not what he said it was. Cruise needed to be called great not because the child's opinion mattered, but because his entire identity required universal agreement. The response is always a map of the wound. The fourth part is the collapse. Every celebrity in every episode eventually breaks down into something that cannot be explained by the public image they constructed. Streisand becomes a literal monster. Gibson becomes a man who covers buildings in waste and begs to be tortured. Bono regresses to an infant state and is breastfed by a stranger. Kanye puts on a wetsuit and joins the fish in the ocean. Hilton loses a competition so thoroughly that she is physically absorbed into another person's body. Harry and Meghan drive endlessly through towns telling crowds about their privacy. The collapse is always the episode's centerpiece. It is the moment the show has been building toward, and it is always something the celebrity cannot control or spin or reframe. The machine has produced its result. What was constructed is now demolished. What was hidden is now on screen. The fifth part is the lack of consequence. This is the part that most people do not notice because it is defined by an absence rather than a presence. After every celebrity collapses, after every mask comes off, after every disproportionate response and every breakdown, nothing changes. Cruise goes back to making movies, Kanye goes back to making music, and eventually comes back to South Park as a recovering gay fish. Gibson continues his career until his real-life behavior catches up with him. The celebrities are not destroyed, they are revealed, and then the world continues. This is the show's most honest and most uncomfortable observation. Revelation does not lead to transformation. Knowing something does not change it. The machine exposes, but exposure alone does not fix anything. The crowd at the end of the Britney episode gets their good harvest and immediately turns to the next target. The celebrity lawsuit in 200 and 201 resolves without anything being resolved. The worldwide privacy tour continues after the episode ends. Parker and Stone have said in multiple interviews across the show's history that they do not believe satire changes the world. They do not make South Park because they think it will fix anything. They make it because pointing at true things is worthwhile even when pointing does not move the thing being pointed at. The machine is not a reform machine. It is a visibility machine. It shows you what is there. There is a specific consistency in who the machine targets. Every celebrity episode in this collection involves someone who has used fame to claim a special kind of untouchability. Streisand used cultural prestige, Cruise used religious affiliation, Kanye used self-proclaimed genius, Bono used humanitarian work. Britney's case is the exception and the inversion, where the machine was being used against her by everyone else, and the show turned the camera on the people operating it. Gibson used religious devotion. Hilton used the brand of being herself. The celebrities in 200 and 201 used collective legal power. Kardashian used edited images. Harry and Meghan used the language of victimhood. Each of these is a different version of the same move. It is the move of saying, I am above ordinary scrutiny because of this specific thing I have. The machine's response to this move is always the same. It takes the specific thing being used as a shield and turns it into the target. The religious film becomes evidence of sadomasochism. The humanitarian record becomes evidence of being waste. The edited images become the thing that harms ordinary girls. The privacy tour becomes the most public thing the privacy seekers have ever done. The machine flips the shield. Parker and Stone built this machine with very specific partners. The children of South Park, particularly Stan, Kyle, and Wendy, function as the machine's operators. They are the ones who say the true thing in the simple way that the adult world has learned not to say. Stan tells Cruise he is okay in the same tone he would use to say the sky is blue. Wendy tells the boy that Kim Kardashian is a hobbit the way she would state any other observable fact. Kyle's guilt about his Jewish heritage dissolves the moment he sees Gibson throwing waste at a building. The children do not have the adult habit of treating famous people as categorically different from regular people. They apply the same standards to everyone. This is the show's deepest structural argument, buried inside 27 years of comedy. Children are not fooled by the construction phase. They do not see the pedestal, they see a person. And when the person behaves in a way that does not match what they are supposed to be, the children say so, because they have not yet learned that you are not supposed to. The celebrity machine is also, and this is important, a machine that the show applies to itself. Parker and Stone have satirized themselves multiple times across the show's run. They appeared as characters in 200 and 201, they have made episodes about the show's own production process, they have addressed criticism of the show directly within the show. The machine does not have an exemption for its operators. This is part of why the show has maintained credibility with audiences for so long. The willingness to eat itself is part of the structure. Every episode in this collection ends with the same quiet note underneath the comedy. The note is, this is what we agreed to pretend was not there, and now you have seen it. 27 years of episodes, hundreds of celebrities, one machine. But a machine needs a reason to exist beyond its own function. You can describe how it works, you can catalog what it has produced, you can map its 5 parts and trace its consistent logic across 2.5 decades of television. And at the end of all that description, there is still a question that has not been answered. Why does it matter? Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Not why is it funny, that part is clear. Why does it matter that Parker and Stone built this machine at all? What does the world look like because South Park exists in it? What would have gone unsaid, unseen, and unexamined if 2 kids from Colorado had never decided that Barbra Streisand was worth turning into a giant robot? That question is what the final section is for. Section 12, why it matters that South Park never looked away. There is a question that follows South Park everywhere it goes. It has followed the show since the first episode aired in 1997. It follows every celebrity episode, every controversial storyline, every moment where the show goes somewhere that other shows decided not to go. The question is simple, and it gets asked in good faith by people who are genuinely trying to understand what the show is doing and whether it is worth defending. The question is this just mean? Is taking a real person, a living human being with a family and a career and feelings, and turning them into a cartoon character who smears waste on buildings or gets absorbed into another person's body or chases a bus in face paint, is that just cruelty dressed up as comedy? Is there a real difference between what South Park does and simple bullying with a larger budget and a national broadcast? This is a fair question. It deserves a real answer. The answer requires going back to the beginning, not just to the first celebrity episode, but to the conditions that made the show possible and the conditions that the show was responding to. Parker and Stone grew up in Colorado in the 1970s and 1980s. They were not from wealthy families. They were not from connected families. They did not grow up surrounded by famous people or by the machinery that produces famous people. They grew up watching television and movies and absorbing the same cultural landscape that everyone else in America was absorbing. And from a very early age, both of them developed a specific sensitivity to a specific kind of falseness. The falseness of people who take themselves too seriously. Parker has talked about this in interviews going back to the early years of the show. He and Stone share a genuine, deep discomfort with the performance of importance, with people who use their fame or their talent or their wealth or their moral positions as reasons why they should not be questioned. With the culture that grows up around famous people, the culture that says this person is beyond ordinary judgment, that criticizing them says more about you than it does about them, that the appropriate response to fame is reverence. They find this deeply, genuinely funny, not in the way that someone finds something funny from a safe distance, in the way that something strikes you as funny because it conflicts so completely with how you actually see the world. South Park began as a show about children in a small Colorado town. It was crude and shocking and deliberately offensive in ways designed to provoke exactly the kind of outrage that Parker and Stone found most revealing. The people who were most upset by early South Park were, very often, the people whose public positions required them to be upset. Celebrities, politicians, religious figures, advocacy groups. People whose authority depended on maintaining a certain tone in public discourse. People for whom the show's existence was an attack not on any specific belief, but on the general principle that some things are above mockery. Parker and Stone responded to this by making more of it. The celebrity episodes did not begin as a category. They grew organically out of the show's general approach to the world. When Parker said he genuinely hated Barbra Streisand, the show turned that into an episode. When Scientology's legal intimidation tactics became a news story, the show addressed it. When the Passion of the Christ dominated cultural conversation for months, the show responded while the conversation manipulation was still happening. When a sex tape made someone famous, the show asked what it meant that fame could work that way. Each episode was a response to something real. None of them were invented from nothing. This is the first part of the answer to whether this is just mean. South Park's celebrity episodes are not random selections. They are not attacks on people chosen by lottery. Every celebrity in every episode in this collection was chosen because they represented something specific in the cultural moment they arrived in. Streisand represented the way cultural prestige can be used to silence criticism. Cruise represented the way religious affiliation can be used to demand immunity from scrutiny. Kanye represented the way self-declared genius becomes a cage that traps the person inside it. Bono represented the way moral authority can be used to cover for personal vanity. Britney represented the way the media's appetite for destruction can be dressed up as entertainment. Gibson represented the way sincere religious belief can be used as cover for something else entirely. Hilton represented the way a brand built on emptiness can be marketed directly to children. The celebrity lawsuit episodes represented the way power seeks to protect itself from accountability. The Hobbit represented the way edited images harm real people who cannot compete with things that do not exist. The Worldwide Privacy Tour represented the way the language of victimhood can be used to generate the exact attention you claim to be fleeing. None of these representations were invented by Parker and Stone. They were observations. The show pointed at things that were already there. This is the second part of the answer. The celebrity episodes are not acts of invention. They are acts of description. Parker and Stone watched what was happening in public life and described what they saw in the most unfiltered way available to them. The comedy comes from the gap between the official description of events and the description the show provides. The official description of Mel Gibson in 2004 was a man of deep faith who made a film about his sincere religious beliefs. South Park's description was a man with a profound love of suffering who found a way to make that love culturally respectable by wrapping it in religion. The official description was not false exactly, but it was incomplete in a way that the show was not willing to leave unaddressed. The third part of the answer involves timing. One of the things that makes South Park's celebrity satire different from most other forms of media commentary is the production schedule. 6 days from concept to broadcast. This means the show can respond to a cultural moment while the moment is still alive, while people are still inside it, while the official narrative is still being formed. This is not just a logistical achievement, it is a philosophical one. It means the show can say the thing that everyone is quietly thinking before the machinery of public relations and media management has had time to suppress it. The Britney episode aired while Britney Spears was still in the news every day. The Passion of the Jew episode aired while The Passion of the Christ was still in theaters. The Worldwide Privacy Tour episode aired 1 month after Harry's book came out. The show is always inside the moment it is describing. This is why the show has remained relevant across 27 years while other satirical programs have dated. It does not comment on history, it comments on now. The fourth part of the answer is the most important and the most easily missed. South Park's celebrity episodes are not primarily about celebrities. The celebrities are the visible part. They are the part that gets the headlines and the public responses and the award nominations and the think pieces. But underneath every celebrity episode in this collection, there is a story about ordinary people. The Britney episode is not about Britney Spears. It is about the crowd. It is about Randy and Sharon and Sheila and Gerald and Officer Barbrady and everyone else in South Park who took photographs and bought magazines and watched the news bulletins and participated enthusiastically and continuously in a process they would have described as entertainment and the show describes as ritual sacrifice. Britney is the most sympathetic character in the episode. The people of South Park are the ones on trial. The Hobbit is not about Kim Kardashian. It is about what happens to Wendy when the world around her chooses a convenient false thing over an inconvenient true thing. It is about the boy with the editing app on his phone. It is about the adults who told Wendy her feelings about the false thing were the real problem. The Paris Hilton episode is not about Paris Hilton. It is about the 4th grade girls who were being handed an identity by a store and a product line and a cultural moment, and about the parents who failed to notice, and about the one adult in the town, the most unlikely adult imaginable, who was the only one willing to stand up and say that this was not something worth wanting. The show uses famous people as mirrors. When you look at what the celebrity is doing in the episode, you are actually being shown what the audience is doing, what the culture is doing, what all of us are doing when we buy the ticket or watch the documentary or refresh the page or join the mob or follow the motorcade. Parker and Stone are not outside the culture they are describing. They have said this explicitly and repeatedly. They are inside it. They grew up inside it. They are products of the same television and movies and magazines and celebrity worship that everyone else in their generation was shaped by. They do not make these episodes from a position of superiority. They make them from a position of recognition. The thing they are pointing at is something they recognize because they have felt its pull themselves. This is why the show does not have heroes. None of the celebrity episodes end with a character who has been completely right about everything and faces no consequences for being right. Wendy loses both times. Kyle's guilt returns in different forms across multiple episodes. Stan delivers moral speeches and then joins the mob in the next scene. The show does not offer a clean exit from the culture it is describing because Parker and Stone do not believe a clean exit exists. What does exist, and what the show argues for in its structure, if not always in its dialogue, is the ability to see clearly. Not to fix, not to escape, just to see. The machine that Parker and Stone built across 27 years and hundreds of episodes is ultimately a seeing machine. It takes the constructed images that famous people present to the world, and it runs them through a process that strips away the construction and shows what is underneath. Sometimes what is underneath is funny and nothing more. Sometimes it is darker. Sometimes, as in the Britney episode, what is underneath is something the show finds genuinely upsetting and says so in the most unambiguous way available to it. The machine does not always produce comfortable results. That is the point. Comfort is what the construction was designed to provide. The official image of every celebrity in this collection was designed to make you feel a certain way about that person. Comfortable, admiring, certain that the person you were looking at was what they appeared to be. The machine's job is to interrupt that comfort long enough to ask whether it is based on anything real. Across 12 sections and 27 years of television, the answer has consistently been not entirely. Not as much as you thought. Look again. Is it mean? Sometimes. The show has acknowledged this. Parker and Stone have said there are episodes they regret. There are moments in this collection that go further than necessary to make the point. The Britney episode, by Parker's own admission, was made in a period where he was watching something genuinely terrible happen to a real person and was angry about it. And the episode carries that anger in ways that are not always comfortable to watch, even when you understand what it is doing. But mean and true are not opposites. Something can be both mean and accurate. Something can make you laugh and make you uncomfortable in the same moment. The discomfort is not a flaw in the machine. It is the machine working. Parker and Stone looked at 27 years of famous people and saw the same thing every time. They saw people who had been handed a story about themselves and had decided the story was more important than the reality. They saw the enormous apparatus that exists to protect that story. And they saw, every single time, that the story could not survive contact with 4 kids from a small town in Colorado who simply refused to pretend it was true. The machine is still running. New celebrities arrive, new stories get constructed, new pedestals get built. South Park gets 6 days to respond. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.